This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Good afternoon and welcome to the GLA Oversight Committee today. If I could welcome members and officers at City Hall and the public and anybody who's watching online, and I'm sure there might be some journalists with a particular interest in our first panel this morning at today's GLA Oversight Committee. If I could remind participants, although I'm sure you all know full well in terms of how you handle one of the microphones and how to use it, just to make sure that you pull it closer to you using the base. So we are, if I could start off by just asking the clerk, Judith Smith, if we've got any apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We've got no apologies for absence today.
Fantastic. And can we move on to declarations of interest? Can we note the list of offices held by the Assembly? And can I ask members if they have any disclosable pecuniary interests for today's meeting? Fantastic. And move on to the minutes from the last meeting. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held, the committee held on the 12th of November and 11th of December to be signed by me as correct? Thank you. I'll do that in a moment. And the summary list of actions, can we note the completed and ongoing actions arising from previous meetings of the GLA Oversight Committee? Noted. And there was an action taken under delegated authority. So if we could note the recent action taken by the Chair of the Assembly following consultation with myself as Chair of the GLA Oversight Committee and Party Group Lead members under delegated authority, namely to sign a petition jointly with the Mayor of London addressed to His Majesty the King seeking to transfer of the former Greater London Council, the GLC's coat of arms to the GLA, the Greater London Authority, which of course has since happened.
Is that still going on?
It's I think
Is that noted?
it's noted. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, progress. 25 years. So we come to our substantive conversation today, an agenda item, which is, of course, Assembly's plenary ways of working. We've got before us three very esteemed guests, colleagues who know the Assembly's work incredibly well. And I'll just introduce them one by one. So we've got Tim Donovan, who is the former political editor at the BBC London. Welcome. We've got Noah Vickers, who is the local democracy reporter at City Hall. Welcome back, Noah. Great to have you. And Ross Lydall, who, of course, is the City Hall editor at The Standard. So welcome to you all. We've obviously, as you know the format, we've got a number of questions for you. The idea of this is to look effectively at our plenary, which we host once a month, generally speaking, with a blank sheet. If we were to look at it again, how would we make sure that it's effective as possible? So from your perspective, what would you say would be the sort of core purpose? And again, starting with a blank sheet, what could be the core purpose for plenary sessions to serve a body like the London Assembly? I'll start with Ross.
I was surprised that you've actually got 9 plenary sessions a year. I thought there were 2, which might tell you something. It certainly told me something. I've been covering City Hall since 2002. And I was taken aback. There were so many meetings, but I think the core purpose has really got to be, challenging yourself to investigate the big issues that Londoners are facing today, and also looking outside, if necessary, the sort of GLA family. I think many meetings that happen here are you scrutinising other necessarily bits of the mayor's empire, the functional bodies and so on. And this is your chance to reach way beyond that, sort of cut across issues, look into particularly health and education. There's, I think, a health committee meeting tomorrow on breast cancer screening, which seems a cracking issue from our perspective as a newsworthy issue. And it's that opportunity really to show you understand what Londoners are thinking and show you're going to do work on their behalf to provide the answers to the questions they're probably asking.
Thank you, Ross. Noah?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think definitely there should be opportunities for the Assembly to break out of just scrutinising the GLA family, looking at how some of the functions of national government are affecting London and perhaps other tiers of local authority as well. I think in terms of the core purpose of plenary, it should be a chance for the Assembly to show what it's agreed on outside of the kind of back and forth Punch and Judy context of Mayor's Question Time. It's a chance for all of you to show we're agreed on that London needs this thing, or that the mayor should be doing this thing, and you can kind of lobby for whatever that change might be. But also, as you're doing at the moment, a chance to dig deep into particular areas of GLA policy with, it might be with a deputy mayor or with TfL commissioner, Met commissioner, and just spending an extended period of time getting answers on some of those kind of areas of GLA competence that might not have been looked into in a way that we as journalists won't be able to. We won't have, an hour plus to speak to the Met Commissioner or whoever it might be.
Thank you. And Tim?
On the left, yeah. Right. I was working out over 20 years. I think I sat through 30 MQTs. That's 600 hours, 36,000 minutes. Time I'm not going to get back, but I'm not complaining, But obviously the same applied to the number of plenary sessions that were going on at the same time. And truth be told, I cannot say the same in terms of my endurance in hours or minutes. Although I wouldn't say these were things that these were sessions that I ignored altogether or didn't find time for. Often they were there but as a kind of reference point. as filling in little elements of detail, perhaps surprising kind of detail that you wouldn't pick up in other fora. But I mean, that tells its own story, that it wasn't, obligatory. It wasn't an essential piece of viewing in the calendar. And two things. I come from a slightly different position from these two, but the first thing I'd say is I don't think how you review this or rebuild this should be driven by the media. It's nice that you've got us here. It's nice that you're listening, but that's a secondary consideration. I think the first consideration is to try and kind of, increase the topicality, the brevity, the pace, the focus, rearrange the way, maybe as groups, individually, you approach it. And I think I would keep the remit very much on the core areas that the family, the GLA, is responsible for. I wouldn't necessarily use a plenary to explore other areas. I kind of see the plenary, and I could be wrong. I mean, I've been out of it for a while, and I haven't seen any since the last budget one. But I would see them sitting somewhere between MQT and the committee system. Committee to go to the more in-depth investigations. Perhaps these plenaries could be used to look much more topically at things that have arisen on that key issues of policing, transport, housing, planning, regeneration. And that's the core ones, and then we know that there are other areas we want to get involved in as well, public health and looking at the development corporations.
Yeah, so at the moment, effectively, we use the 10 sessions a year to look at those different topics, and we would bring the relevant deputy mayor potentially, or the commissioner or equivalent for those areas, to go through mostly the family of the GLA's topic, areas of competence. And obviously you've got differing views as to whether we stick with something similar to that or look more externally. In terms of the design, we've got at the moment the morning sessions are Q&As for, as Noah has referred to, roughly about 2.5 hours, I think it is, with those people that we're interviewing. And then an afternoon session where we discuss motions and debates. Do you think that design currently helps or hinders our ability to do our job? Do you think there should be, is there potentially a different design that you think you've seen elsewhere that could work? I'll start with yourself, Tim.
I'm happy to try a model, put a model past you. Motions and what you do in the afternoons is maybe something we could come on to. So look, the fact that you're here and having this inquiry indicates that there's probably a feeling in this room and beyond among Assembly members and others that we could do things better and use it in a better way. So anything I say now is just in the spirit of that as an observer as well. And I imagine you'll all be able to find lots of things wrong or with what I'm about to suggest, or reasons why it can't happen. But what about if you were thinking on that idea of those core areas as well, that you had a plenary, you don't have to have fewer of them in future, you keep the same number, and you have a plenary for policing, transport, housing, planning, regeneration every month. Now you fit it into the architecture of the rest of your month and your year. We can come on to that if you like, but there's 3 hours. You'd have scope if you wanted, depending on the topicality, the urgency of any of the issues, to do an hour or an hour and a half on your key issues, policing, or an hour and a half on both policing and transport in the morning. You've got the overspill, you've got the possibility of the afternoon. We'll come on to the motions later. The afternoon's available. Even if in some circumstances it's an hour each on those 3 main areas. You could do that. And I think that would achieve two things. Obviously, there would be that sense of topicality and giving you guys a chance to respond in a timely fashion to things that are out there that we're all talking about and we know are bothering Londoners. And I don't know, I mean, an example might be, when's the next transport plenary planned? Oh, wow, got them there. That was oh, got them there. No, and so later in the autumn, for instance, I mean, as an example, so if you had a transport, I was thinking on the way here, if you had a transport plenary this month, what could you have in it? You'd have latest on Oxford Street from the TfL's point of view. You'd have Zipcar disappearing from the capital, and you'd have even like the latest travel trends, London travel in London, which is put out just before Christmas, with all the incredible nuggets about how we get around the capital and what we do, or how we're not getting around the capital very well and whatever. No, one of those that transport report to me could take a whole session with you guys. Anyway, so that's, I slightly digress. That's the kind of thing by way of an example. What I think this would do, if you did it every month is you would deny all you members saying stuff and asking questions about everything, but you'd get the groups, your different groups, much more disciplined in your thinking. You would have one or two leading on the police questions. You'd have one or two prepping on the transport questions. You would focus on a few issues, not a many over 3 hours. As I say, you would focus on the 5 or 6 issues. And I imagine that problem is going to be, the problem there is going to be choosing how you're going to choose among yourselves. There'll be disagreement. But my understanding is you have a system now which is a little bit ad hoc, a bit kind of argy-bargy, you know. One person doesn't really want to have this as a plenary, don't really think this should be talked about, someone else thinks that. Well, you could get around that maybe with some kind of steering committee that has the leaders of all the parties on it, steering group. You decide between them. It won't be open to the public, but maybe you publish the minutes a month or 2 months down the line so we can see if L. Duval is objecting to a discussion on housing. I'm completely hypothetical making it, you know, or S. Hall doesn't want to talk about, you know, the great homicide rate currently in the capital. So the public can see that as well. And then so you'd lose every individual member asking questions on every subject, but you'd really focus. You'd make the whole thing sing along much more. You'd get the key opinion formers decide, giving you the update on what was going on, and then maybe you could tie that into MQT because you wouldn't have the mayor at those things, but anything you learned, you put to the MQT. And if you were missing your opportunity, so final thing, I won't say any more. If you're missing your opportunity, because I know Assembly members get frustrated by not being able to follow their own little pet subjects and whatever, and maybe their pet question, whatever, you get frustrated with that. Well, you get an opportunity. You keep the questions really short, brief, going towards, you know, forensic, getting answers. But you get an opportunity, Assembly members, at the end, the lead Assembly member, for a minute to upsum your position, how you feel, what you've learnt, what the Transport Commission needs to go away and find out. So anyway, that's my model. But I mean, I understand it's probably completely undoable, but just the kind of thing that might completely come from it in a completely different way.
No, thank you, Tim. And that sounds quite similar to what government departments effectively have their government departmental question times weekly or fortnightly. So you've got a regular opportunity to ask those ministers questions on that topic. But
sorry, I didn't want to, and others will have other things to say, but for instance, could you, just going back to a transport example, if you had the Transport Commissioner in, you've got something very timely, you need to know about Zipcar, you need to know about whatever. 2 weeks later, depending on what that information you've been provided or haven't been provided, you have the mayor in front of you, and there is arguably, you know, well, there will always be an excuse, but then there's no excuse why the mayor can't give you an even more updated or comment on what we've just seen. And so you tie the whole thing into it, and plenary becomes part of it.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Tim. Noah?
Yeah, I'd agree with much of that. I think it often felt a bit like sort of rolling the dice, looking at what was going to be discussed at plenary whenever the agenda was published, and sort of working out, is it going to be of interest? What are they going to be talking about next week? And so definitely a more structured approach to what topics that come up for discussion would be beneficial, I think. It wouldn't have to follow Tim's model. If you were concerned about the amount of time available for each topic, you could sort of spread it out over a number of sessions. Rather than doing it all in one each time. But I think that would help. And I would also agree that tying some of the discussions more directly to Mayor's question time and having them happen not long beforehand would also help to probably help all of you get more from the Mayor in those sessions too.
Thank you. And over to Ross.
Well, I think the key issue you've got here, looking at the bigger picture, is about raising awareness of yourself and your work. So what I would suggest is being more radical with the plenary sessions, first by not having them here, and second by not having them in the daytime. Actually go out on location, move around the city, go directly to Londoners, go directly to points of concern, go straight into those flashpoints, but you'd have to be much more nimble on your feet and be able to, sort of jump in within probably no more than a fortnight, if possible. Obviously, a lot can be done by working ahead and looking to see what's coming up. Now, one example that springs immediately to mind is with the Chinese embassy. There's no reason why there couldn't have been an Assembly plenary meeting 2 nights ago right beside it, or hire the Tower of London and invite 300 Londoners here to talk about that. I think, you look at the subjects and go to them. Like how many times have we talked in this chamber or the old City Hall about Hammersmith Bridge? Hold a meeting at the Hammersmith Odeon. You might not be Bruce Springsteen, but you can get pretty close to the bridge. Like similarly with HS2, get right up there to Old Oak Common, stick a marquee up or go into the offices beside there where HS2 are, have a look at what Old Oak Common means for London, ditto for Euston, what on earth is happening there. So actually get yourself out of here and get yourself out and about at times. People can come and watch you and contribute to your meetings as well. So it's not just you asking one or two sort of chosen experts. Let's sort of hear from the people, almost like adapt or scrap people's question time, because that, I think, to me is a sort of a waste of time pretty much, because it's in the end it's people want to ask the mayor questions, but you guys want to be asked questions too, but you don't really have the answer to give, and you shouldn't really have to answer the questions either, because it's not you who's doing the stuff. But if you essentially become the questioning authority and you're almost like using your office or authority to bring together people that Londoners want to hear from on these key issues, I think that would be the way forward for the plenary, and that would mark it out as being different from MQT and different from the committee meetings.
Very radical thinking there. Thank you, Ross. And Tim, I saw you wanted to. Did you have another thought on it, or should
I can't remember what was about. Was it people's question time? I mean, I imagine there are practical difficulties with some of those things in a very short space of time, being able to react, to transport you all over. But I absolutely agree with the principle of finding that forum when the issue or the subject is right, or being able to do it in some way. I suppose, yeah, no practicalities. I can't remember the other thing that Ross said. There was one other thing. It'll come back to me what he said that I wanted to comment on.
And you don't all have to answer, but do you feel there's any pros or cons from the current way that we operate that we should be making sure that we write down that you haven't necessarily covered off so far? No?
Any things about the way it's done now?
Yeah.
Well, I think we've kind of said.
I think you've covered it already.
Honestly, I imagine from limited conversations I've had that there are an awful lot of you here and then wider assembly that kind of feel frustrations around it as well, I think, or don't get what they want out of it. I think, without repeating myself, but trying to re-establish that link between what the plenary is there to give people an opportunity as part of the process, that accountability and scrutiny process, which doesn't culminate, but monthly reaches that thing about MQT, whatever. But you've got information already. You could use this process to help getting public information, information on the record that you're then putting to them out. I think this helps the scrutiny process of the mayor. I don't know about this actually. I don't know whether you would necessarily have to ask the deputy mayors. There are some issues always around getting guests, isn't it? Sometimes you're concerned or you need to give people time. Well, once the police and Transport London and the head of housing and planning here know that these things are coming, they'll find space. It's in the diary. As to the Met, I mean, you don't have to have the commissioner every time. You have to have someone with his authority. Or you have more than one officer, depending on what the topical subjects it is that you want to ask. And it doesn't really matter, because you're wanting the experts. You're wanting the people that are responsible for the data, for instance, or who would have been responsible for talking to Zipcar. Or I know I keep on coming back to that one.
Well, we did have a specific. We did have a specific meeting on Zipcar actually. That was doing what you're suggesting. Where we
did you have a plenary on it? Sorry, which is
well, not a plenary, but a specific Transport Committee meeting just on Zipcar as an emergency. So
so imagine. Sorry, probably you would have gone. I don't know what's happened to that. Have you had your investigation, or you're going to have an investigation into it, or you've had it? That's very quick.
This is typical of journalists. I knew this would happen. The questions would be turned back on us.
No, exactly. Yeah. Oh no, sorry. Yeah.
I think it's just tragic that Tim is
sorry,
actually.
I'm just joking. Ellie. Yeah.
I can't because we did have an emergency transport committee which was arranged within a week, I think.
Well, sorry, I was just going to say about that. An emergency committee meeting took that role. Now, would you could have, you did that, and that's fine, but the plenary could have been doing that. If you wouldn't have had to do that meeting if you'd had a plenary coming up in January or December that you could bring it up at. Good.
And we did have an emergency plenary in the summer, in fact, around the front desk proposals last year. So exactly that, and I think that's probably one of the successes of plenary. I'm going to ask, Assemblymember Prince first, and then Assemblymember Georgie.
Thank you. We're on question 2 now. Yeah, good. Thank you. Okay, this is to all the panel. Given the Mayor can routinely evade direct answers, which I'm sure you've witnessed during plenary and most other meetings, does this not suggest the current format prioritises political theatre over genuine accountability? What concrete changes would be needed to stop the Mayor simply talking around the questions put to him?
Yes, he does. Yes, you're right. I always found that back in the good old days, if you like, when Ken Livingstone was mayor, and only mean good old days in terms of the media interaction, obviously, not taking a view on whether he was the greatest mayor, he used to have a weekly press conference, and Tim and I would be there with Simon Harris and Mark Demery, I think it was, of LBC, previously of this parish as well, and we always found that if you asked them the same question 3 times, by the third question you get the answer you hoped for, or a more unusual one. And I think that is something that you could pursue with Sadiq as well. I also think that the whole setup is in kind of, if you remember, if you ever watched fantasy football back in the days when you had Badil and Skinner and you had the bloke at the side in his dressing gown, you had Stato. And just as you have with, if you listen to Test Match Special, you'll have Aggers chatting away, then Andy Zaltzman will come in and tell you, how many times, a certain batsman's hit a six times in a row. So you have somebody on the side, and I thought the perfect example today at the Transport Committee this morning, where the committee was asking perfectly valid questions, and the amount of times that the 2 witnesses from TfL said, we'll have to get back to you on that, I thought was pretty shocking. And I thought there was room, either they should have been required to bring their Stato along, because I felt I could have actually given the answers and the data that they decided they didn't know where it was, because I know it exists, because I've written about it. Similarly, you need your Stato sat there beside you to say, oh, by the way, Assemblymember Prince, it was 3 months ago at MQT that Sadiq Khan said X, Y and Z, I will sell you 10 bananas for £1, and he's now telling you he's going to sell them for £2, but you can point to the fact. And I think the data and the information is there, but you perhaps need a little bit of help when you're asking your questions, and perhaps the person answering the questions should have that kind of data to hand as well, because I don't think it's acceptable that so many people come here, including some very senior people, and say, we'll write to you on that. And I'm frequently left gobsmacked as a London taxpayer that people are earning big bucks and don't seem to know more than I do. And I'm not saying I know a lot, but just by doing a day job in this patch, they should know more than I do, and they don't seem to.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd agree that the Assembly should definitely be assertive in when dealing with guests and saying that you've been briefed on what we're going to ask you, or more often it's just very obvious what's going to be coming up and what's going to be up for discussion. And so when you do have a guest saying we'll have to get back to you in writing on that, I would agree that's obviously frustrating, and there's a need to be assertive in response to that. I think in terms of scrutiny versus political theatre, that's always going to be an issue, and it's probably unavoidable up to a point, but definitely more engagement along the lines of the good old days, press conferences, more opportunities to ask questions are always a good thing.
Tim?
So I note the question, and I suppose all mayors are going to and have the right and obligation or inclination to do things in their own way, and it's kind of I think it's quite hard for a media person to make too much of a comment about the how they do it. It's kind of what we get in the end to an extent. So I won't necessarily get drawn on your assertion that there's a lot of evasion of questions. If that is the case, then perhaps there is an issue around how you as parties use the available infrastructure, allocate your questions, focus, reduce them, maybe the ambition, but make sure that when you're really hitting a subject, you're really, you're hitting it. I agree with everything these two have said, but I'd also say, focusing on plenaries, that's why you could use the plenary process to complement and draw out. Ross, sees this all the time and has gripes with information that he thinks should be forthcoming. It's not. I kind of agree. If the plenary, if you raise the status of the plenary, there would be an expectation that all information over a reduced number of subjects, you would not be able to argue that the remit was going to be too big for that guest that day. If they haven't got those answers, that should be an issue of some concern to members, and you should say so collectively. But also, if you were linking it to MQT, you'd then have this position of, the mayor ultimately being accountable for these officials and these people and the paucity of information. If it wasn't there, it definitely needs to be there 2 weeks later in MQT. Otherwise, you should all be rightly saying, why not? This is appalling. This is bad. This is a shambles.
Can I just make one other point on this as well? Because I think perhaps you can sort of set aside the party political battles, even just at plenary, because one of the best things you could do is help each other. So that, for example, if the Tories are asking a question, and then if the Labour or Greens want to join in and pursue one of the things that frustrates me so much about this place is that you don't seem to listen to the answer, and it's like you've got half a story there, and it's like, why did somebody not just keep going on that? And it's because you're ready to move on or they've run out of time. But say, like, if Neil Garrett's asked something on the budget, then suddenly somebody else just wants to say, can you just clarify exactly what you've said? I think there was a recent example when he and Kripesh were asking similar questions on the budget, and it meant that London benefited more as a whole because you got a better answer because the Assembly was working together rather than dividing each other. And obviously the problem is always going to be that not only a third of the Assembly members are on the side of the Mayor, and that doesn't look good, and it's difficult for Londoners to understand. There are rare examples, as Assembly Member Baker had a memorable exchange over Zipcar recently. I was trying to say that Tim missed the great drama, which was, to me, one of the best moments when she completely knew her staff and she put the Mayor on the spot and held his feet to the fire. And it was awkward for him, and it may have ruined her career, but she did some great work as an Assembly member, and I would say it looked great. I said to her the other day, she's a YouTube sensation. If you Google the London Assembly, Ellie pops up, burst now pretty much, and more of that, please, really.
Can I apologise for missing that moment? I mean, I will look at it when I go away from here, If I'd known the word emergency was in there, I would have done it. But I agree with everything.
Thank you so much, Assembly Member Georgie.
I think where there seems to be consensus amongst the three of you, and by the way, I said in pre-me, I'm sure I'm allowed to. I was really looking forward to this session because you three are very honest individuals, to be fair. But no, they won't be nice to me, even though I flattered them.
Are you about to try and turn the tables after all that appalling reporting we've been doing over the years?
Nice try, Tim.
Here we go.
So I was going to ask, where there seems to be consensus amongst the three of you on plenary, it's neither proactive nor reactive, is the impression that I get. Is that a fair assessment? A nod of heads will do. If you disagree and your answer follow-up, you can say. And the reason I say that, because you make a very interesting point, Ross, is the fact is, because the dates are effectively preset and we can't anticipate what's going to happen, another terrorist attack, issues on London Bridge, delays at Silvertown, whatever. Because of the way it's structured currently, we are not engaging in that process. And one of your very comprehensive ideas is, why don't you move around London, but then equally be more reactive to what's happened in that instance? Now, obviously, if that were to happen, colleagues possibly will say, or officers, well, we have to plan it in advance and this and that, to which your answer would be? Yeah?
Well, obviously there's practical issues around the mayor's security, and we came into that a couple of times last year, didn't we, when it couldn't be announced with people's question time where the venue was, and then they have to be ticketed and so on. I don't think there's a harm if meetings get a bit sparky. I think, well, it's difficult to know without seeing, perhaps I shouldn't talk too much about that because we don't know about the particular police intelligence. But I just think you've got 33 town halls that are probably unused on a Thursday night or a Saturday night or a Saturday afternoon when people might actually come along, and that use your town halls, use these buildings. There's plenty of public buildings that are easily accessible quite quickly. And just on the plenary meetings, like there's one listed, for next I think the 5th of February. I don't look on the website today. I don't know what the subject is yet. So even if I, as a Londoner, wanted to come along to that, I don't know what you're going to be asking about. So I think you need to do, you've got your own website and your own publicity system as well, but you're not really publicising yourself very well sometimes.
But exploring the point, which is if we are to be reactive, you know, could your answer possibly be, well, if one of your colleagues says, well, I can't make it in that emergency meeting or that emergency plenary, for X, I'm washing my hair that night, you know, would you just say, well, like it or lump it? You know, the Assembly members that can go should go to discuss this urgently at that plenary meeting.
Totally. I think 25 members is too many, not necessarily in terms of the whole Assembly, but I don't think you need 25 people sat round a table. You know, as Maggie Thatcher said, you know, government by committee doesn't work. Similarly, you know, scrutiny by 25-member committee doesn't work. I think if you're interested enough, you make time. It's just like going out for a drink with your best mate. If you want to do it, you can do it. You can find time. You can find a babysitter. If you want to turn up there and, you know, fight your socks off to save Cruise Hill, you'll be there, whether it's tonight, tomorrow, or 2 months down the line.
Thank you. I think you also sort of raised about the time allocation as well, really, which I think sort of goes back to some of the questions previously. But no, it's come up as part of that. So, but I'm sure we'll cover it a bit later. I'll pass on to Assembly Member Russell.
Yeah, I'm really very excited by this idea of actually moving around, because I mean we've been talking about PQT and the way that PQT is, you know, it's really struggling to find its purpose, and actually, you know, looking into how plenary works, maybe actually we're going to find a solution that's a kind of hybrid between plenary and PQT. But I think that idea of, particularly as City Hall is now not right in the centre near London Bridge, but it's right out, it's, you know, we're properly east in Newham. So for Londoners to feel that the Assembly is kind of doing scrutiny on their behalf, actually, if we were moving around London a bit more, I think the logistics of doing it every fortnight may prove beyond the resources of City Hall. But even if we were to try it, you know, on a semi-regular basis, I think that's got legs. Just thinking. Just a bit, going a bit more deeply into that kind of topical and timely piece. I mean, the way that plenary works is that, you know we've got a fire plenary, or we've got a transport plenary, or we've got housing plenary, and then we all go off and we each have the particular things that we're interested in, and we kind of use that as an opportunity to question specialists on that topic and to kind of further the kind of particular scrutiny that each of us is involved in. So what you're effectively saying is actually, as an Assembly, we say to ourselves, what's the topical issue, and for that broad subject area, and let's focus right in on that. Is that because you think that people would be more interested because it's more timely, or is there something else in that?
I'm just wondering, presumably it must be, at the moment, if you know, with transport example, in the autumn, you presumably don't even know, you can't even begin to imagine what you're going to ask or want to know there. You kind of, I don't know, I mean, you almost have to answer for me, is that how you all approach it. Individually, you use plenaries to try and pursue things that are of interest to you.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
you'll all want to.
I think probably we've each got a work plan for the,
and I imagine,
for the committees we cover.
It probably being more effective if there was a more brutal work within your own groups about to focus. No, Caroline, you're not going to get to ask about that. That's going to be Zach, if he's ever here anymore. You know, that's going to be him. You don't do that. And to bring a kind of system, which I think just has, I'm repeating myself really, but just enables focus. I think if you're topical and you keep the number of subjects down, but you do it more regularly, transport, say, through the, then I think you'll get a result of digging a little bit more deeply on those topical issues. It shouldn't be treading on the toes of committees. If committees, in fact, the plenary could feed into that. It raises issues where we cannot deal with here because we've only got an hour or 2 hours. We need to go and do a committee meeting on this because we've just found out no one's giving us answers. Or you know, and anyway.
Do you want to add anything on that, Ross or no? No.
I think,
Ross?
you know, a lot of issues could be planned ahead and still be topical, because a lot of things don't happen quickly. Like, you know, we can guarantee that Oxford Street is still going to be of issue come June or July.
Yeah.
I know, for example, that the issue of smartphones in secondary schools is going to be an issue, and it's going to be talked about, you know, for years to come, really, and probably right at the cusp of a lot of schools. This is not the government social media ban. This is actually kids having smartphones in schools. I think would be a great one as well, so that you can inform the debate. And similarly as well, school closures. That's something that has been topical and is getting probably more topical tied in there as well. So you could probably plan with confidence plenaries around these, if you like, the subjects. Because just looking at, for example, what you did last year, you've got housing and planning in December with Jules Pipe and Tom Copley, November policing with Sadiq and Mark Rowley, the Front Council's one in August with Comer Schwartz and Matt Twist, which was probably the most topical of the lot, which was, I think, a very good one. In July, you had TfL with Andy Lord and Sadiq. June, health inequalities. So you're kind of going through your usual sort of big issues, but I just think there's plenty of scope within that if you think, because and then if you say, well, what's going to be topical then? Well, look at your own post bags. You are, you know, almost like first responders in terms of big issues in London. You often tell us what people are getting wound up about. You know, like Keith Prince 3 or 4 months ago was the first person to tell me about the W14 or W16 or whatever in Woodford and Wanstead and so on, because he'd got his campaigners coming here. So it's that kind of thing. And actually, it was then mentioned this morning, wasn't it? That's one of the many. But then the bigger issue there is the bus routes being cut back, and this dilemma that Ellie raised about, well, hang on, if you keep cutting the bus routes back, how are you going to get bus passenger numbers up?
Yep.
And if bus passenger numbers keep falling, you're going to keep cutting the bus routes. So there are micro issues that become macro issues, and I think you actually know better than you think what these could be.
So the challenge for us is, because we're used to, I mean, and I'm sure every Assembly member has a kind of a bit of a work plan of the things that they try to bring up in committee and that they're really interested in, that people are writing to them about. And so you're kind of, when you're planning what you're going to do in Transport Plenary, you're sort of thinking, OK, that's a chance to bring up X and Y and Z. But actually, you're saying to us as an Assembly and as a group of politicians that we should be in dialogue with each other to say, how can we use this plenary opportunity to really dig into a particular thing, so that we're kind of chasing down stuff that one of us has opened up questions on, and that we can actually really get some scrutiny that will be of interest to Londoners. And because it's frustrating when we're confined on the clock, you know, we've got our 6 minutes in MQT, or we've got in plenary we even have less than 6 minutes, so you can't actually get to where you want to go to, and particularly as in, you know, some meetings you get a sort of pre-scripted answer to your question, so that takes up at least 2 minutes of your 6 minutes of time. So it's actually challenging us to think, can we work together on behalf of Londoners, chasing things down, obviously all of us coming from our different political positions, but kind of, is there a way to actually work in a different way, in the way that we try and do that scrutiny?
I mean, you've answered your own question in a way, haven't you? About
I've sort of been trying to. I've been getting. Yes, you have literally watched me in real time, getting to the gist of what it is you've been saying to us.
I mean, I'm just curious to know whether. I mean, there must be. What are the I'm presuming you all find it frustrating.
Well, the fact we're doing this,
these things, it isn't a miracle. It isn't like bizarre that we find it frustrating watching it, but you love doing it. That correlation would be unlikely. So you can see that you. So, yeah, I think there are ways of addressing that.
Yeah, I think, can you just for, at least for plenary meetings, can you set aside party differences and work collectively would be the challenge, really, because I'm aware that, the choice of investigations for the committees is obviously political. It's as much as what you choose to investigate is what gets blocked. I've heard a story in good authority that one previous chair of the police committee wanted to investigate knife crime and murder and so on, and you were particularly enthusiastic to investigate road crime, which I'm completely on your side with that, but colleagues in other parties were less keen. But perhaps the sort of you could all work as one when you realise actually everybody cares about Oxford Street, and you know, get yourself down to the top floor of John Lewis and have your meeting there, or whatever.
Yep.
That's probably why there should be, or it would be useful to have more formal arrangements for how you decide what to do, really, or is it a bit informal
We
now?
do.
And you have these battles, and you have this, and no one wants to do, someone wants to do this and someone doesn't. All those examples that Ross has given, is there a way around that? We could risk throwing ourselves into that, you know, where we all, maybe as the press and public, get to see what decision was made, as I mentioned earlier, that not maybe at the time, but we realise what's going on behind the scene. I was curious about another thing. You had the opportunity for plenaries. 2 were cancelled last year. Was that because no one could kind of decide which one, what we should talk about in that time? I mean, you can see there's a kind of architectural, institutional
that was
issue,
availability of guests, as far as I remember.
Well, you know, I've already made a point about that, which is like, you have it and they give it the best shot. It will say a lot about the Met if they send somebody who's unbriefed and can't answer, and it will say a lot about the transport, and it will not reflect well on any of these organisations. I think this a change and doing it in a completely different way would flip the kind of sense of authority, and I think people would understand the importance of appearing at these hearings.
It would also presumably enable us to kind of investigate things around, for instance, Thames Water, or, you know, the kind of, you know, some of those big issues which are kind of really serious in terms of London's resilience. Chair, I think I'm going to hand back to you, because
Thank you, yeah, and
the questions that I was meant to be asking had kind of been answered in the first bit. So I
appreciate that, yeah. Assemblymember Best.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back to those formats quickly, because I think there's 2 suggestions, if I'm right, or you can make me wrong. Ross, are you saying that basically you'd have more issue-based plenaries? So, for example, things like police counters comes up, that's what our next plenary's on. And Tim, you're talking about a format where every single month it would be police, transport, housing, and we've got an hour on each, and we have the guests.
That's one you could see. I mean,
Yeah.
you could go for a model that's slightly different, but I'd still think the core would be, what, two, at least, what, how many have you got? You've got 10. Do you have 1 or 2 budget? 2. So you've got 8 left. I mean, so you do two of you know, policing, transport, planning, housing and regeneration or whatever, and then you've got 2 to play with, where you want to do the fire and you want to do the Old Oak Common and Olympic Park and other areas if there were emergency. You've got wildcards as well. You have a wild where you can do some special ones as well, because you've got the afternoons to play with here, and you've got 2 other sessions.
So not saying doing it all in one day.
I would say you could do 3. I mean, it's depending on the time you're prepared to allocate. I mean, it's kind of, I'm assuming that you haven't felt that 3 hours going for it, allowing all members to talk about things once a year, is particularly good. Delivers for anyone.
No,
so
and it doesn't coincide.
So could you do you know, that 1 hour regularly with someone who's due to come could prove to be really effective. It could be effective at how you ask your questions and what you deliver, and you make sure and you decide they're going to be little questions, not statements, because you've got a chance to sum up and say something at the end. It's just a thought. But
So essentially both proposals hit the relevancy nail of these actually being newsworthy sessions that are touching on the policy decisions of the day, and finding out something new or addressing something that's
I think
live.
I feel slightly differently, Ross, about that. I think I said before, not about the newsiness in itself, don't worry about us, but I think it becomes a process of scrutiny, of forensic getting to issues. And I think you then just don't leave, and you've all said it, Ross has said it as well. I mean, you haven't all said it, but, you know, the inability sometimes to have very long to look at an issue, and then you have to move on, or you move, you know, to something else. It wouldn't necessarily have to be newsworthy in itself. It could be something that blows up a few months hence, but you've had that process of getting someone on the record there. Which you can follow up with MQT.
Yeah, the reason obviously why I want it to be newsworthy, because if it matters to the news, then it matters to people, and also the most of the media that comes out of plenary at the moment will be opposition groups with the clips that we put on social media. And that will be like a minute clip that's just showing a shouty exchange. But people actually then probably want to see the meat behind that, and there's no more meat of what's the story behind that. So to come to why it's also important is the comment you've made, Ross, before at the 25th anniversary event around the, I think you said, with all respect, but the cast list being a very familiar run of faces, and having perhaps some new faces trying to find a better word of upgrade, or I don't know, but looking at it, improving the guests, or maybe the evidence that comes from that, what would those guests look like that you think would look like a new difference of opinion? And obviously, this is why it's really important the media's interested, because it goes hand in hand that if it's going to be reported, we're going to get better guests who are going to be willing to come down to Newham.
It's essentially got to be what we'd call a case study. I was thinking this very thing this morning when the two TfL officials talking about buses and buses getting stuck, and then Keith started discussing the lack of toilets for bus drivers and the London Bill of Rights, the bus driver's Bill of Rights. And I thought, why is there a bus driver not sat there, or somebody from one of the bus companies, or the bloke who's set up the Bill of Rights, who who give first-hand experience of that? Why have you not got perhaps a more on your police front counter close? Why have you not got somebody who's been similarly affected like Paul Kohler was all these years ago in Wimbledon? And that's almost when the issue of police station closures came to light, because he obviously got badly beaten in his own home and the police station was round the corner. So I think there are plenty of people who've got real life experiences of it. So you could have the officials giving the policy line and say, but hang on a minute, here's a Londoner who's been directly affected and who perhaps is pretty well informed, or has then formed a campaign on the back of that. I think you've actually got this for the breast cancer screening thing. I think there's sort of more specialist people speaking tomorrow. But I'm just thinking back, in terms of the people you have had, probably the best meeting recently that I can think of in terms of a newsy flashpoint, and I don't think it was a plenary, it was when you had Tom Windsor, the police watchdog inspector, and Sadiq sat side by side, all talking about, I think, how he sacked Cressida Dick. And it was, gripping telly, if you like. It wasn't quite the traitors, but it was up there in terms of what you can achieve. And it's that sort of thing as well. So if this morning, if you had, bus driver, and they're saying, oh, but we've got all these portaloos, but we just haven't put them anywhere. And some poor bloke saying, I've had to drive this bus for 4 hours, because the issue isn't about him going to the loo, it's about him driving too fast and running over a cyclist because he's bursting for the loo. And if you had, here's the evidence, what are you going to do about it then, Christina? I think that's what you need. So I would suggest a little bit more donkey work in finding people who are directly affected, just as we would try and do that as journalists. You try and tell the story often through people who are affected rather than the people who are writing the policy.
Can I just ask, but that this morning was a committee meeting, wasn't it? Yeah. So rather than a plenary, but I accept all those. So all those points are relevant. I'm just to committee, but they're asking a slightly different question, but totally relevant. I get it, but.
Just one final question as well. I think we've established that plenary doesn't know what it's doing. Is it scrutiny? Is it an overview? Is it political theatre? But in your opinion, what should it be? What should that time be set aside to do? I kind of like, Tim, your idea that it's almost a precursor to MQT of this deep dive. But how can we sum it up? I think it needs a name, really, doesn't it?
I would definitely drop plenary. I think that's a terrible name. So that's the first thing,
Noah's going to rename it for us.
Here's my new name. No, I think this couldn't be the complete purpose of it, but there's so much work happening within each of the committees. It could be a chance to not sort of go over in any great detail that work, but kind of flag. We have published this report. In fact, my committee, you could have each of the sort of committee chairs standing up and saying, what we've been looking into over the last couple of months or so is this. We published this report. We issued these recommendations to the mayor. We haven't heard back. Or, the mayor has said he will consider what we have suggested. And sort of being more assertive in asking for answers in response to all of this work, I think would not be a bad thing. And even sort of coming back a year later and saying, we issued this recommendation. It might not just have been to the mayor, but, national government or whoever. And, they haven't done what we've asked for. We'd like to record, our disappointment, as this was a, cross-party report. That sort of thing would be a chance to revisit topics and areas that might not have got much of an airing at the time. and I think would show again the Assembly sort of coming together on things it's agreed on that London needs. I think the same is true of motions, which often would kind of disappear into the ether after being debated. I'd have to sort of go hunting to see did the Mayor's office send a letter in response to this, or being able to the person that proposed the motion could at a future plenary meeting say, I'm happy to report that the Mayor's office have been in touch and have said that they will actually do this thing that we called for. Isn't that great? Same, and also, we haven't talked yet about petitions, which are also covered at plenary sessions. I think those are often, you'll have an Assembly member, as I remember it, just sort of reading out, this has been sent to us, I hereby send this to the Mayor's office. But actually having the person who started the petition come in and speak for maybe a minute or something, or 2 minutes, would help illustrate why the issue is important, why it's come to City Hall, and might improve the chances of it being covered by the media.
Thank you. Assemblymember Georgiou.
I think excuse me, on the point of guests, I mean, one of the things, so the Sir Tom Windsor example, I think was quite a good one, because essentially you had two men that clearly didn't like each other, had very contrary opinions on that whole Cressida Dick thing. And I think it was the first time, I wasn't an Assembly member then, but Sir Tom Windsor gave it to him in public, didn't care, didn't hold back. And that is something that seldom happens in this place. And I wonder how you would navigate, because actually one of the things as an AM that I find really tedious, not just in plenary but in committee meetings, there is no, guests generally tell you what you want to hear, or you navigate your questions around that. There's no exchange, there's no pushback in a really serious way, like you had in that example. So how would you, and I know that you, Ross, you gave that bus driver example, so, but ultimately what bus driver is going to stick his neck on the line, a risk, his RMT mates will say, actually, don't go too heavy on kind of weather. All right, well, can we just, enough with the muttering? Honestly, it's so boring. It's so boring. Honestly, there we go. There's your moment. Oh, my God.
Can we start muttering, guys?
Yeah, all the time. But anyway, so how do you go about sort of seeking out that guest to say, don't worry, just say what you want to say without fear of reprisals in order to get that sort of exchange?
Just ask. Some people will say yes, some people... It's sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes just people are so keen to have their say, but if you don't ask, you won't get. It's as simple as that. Just chance your arm. Half will say no. 2 days ago, I did a story about the Freedom Pass. This is another great issue, I would say. The Freedom Pass and the 60-plus Oyster, I would say, would be a great issue, and travel concessions is a plenary subject. But 2 days ago, for about the past month, I've been writing stories about the Freedom Pass. This London pensioner lives up in Burntoke, had set up this petition which got 88,000 signatures saying save the Freedom Pass. It may be the case that the Freedom Pass wasn't threatened and it's a concoction, but never mind. I phoned him up and I said, I've done all these stories. Do you want to give us your story? And lo and behold, he did. And he even sent me a picture of him at Ascot with his fancy tie on we could use. So you end up with the story. But if you don't ask, you don't get. And I think it's simple as that. Just ask them. You know where the points of conflict are. Just
an example of that, Ross, right? So clearly that Freedom Pass thing didn't come out of nowhere. And I can't, I'm not going to get into politics of it, because clearly a party in London Council said, why don't we think about this? It blew up into this big story, and then politics took over. So, don't ask, you don't get. What politician is going to sit there from a political party and say, yeah, I think we should do X, Y, and Z with the Freedom Pass? Do you see the dilemma?
Well, there were different views round the table at the London Council's Tech Committee, so perhaps the Lib Dem councillor from Richmond, who was the one to pipe up most strongly, might fancy his chances here. Why not do that? I think, slightly as adjacent to that, but I would love to see more borough leaders here answering your questions, because I think London councils as an organisation and the boroughs really deserve your scrutiny too. But I think there's plenty of people who are prepared to give their views in public.
Thank you. You can always empty chair them, of course, if they don't turn up as well. So, Assembly Member Prince.
Thank you. I think you may have pretty much answered this because you're giving very full answers. Lucky we're not on the timer. Would you agree that one of the biggest missed opportunities is the failure to use plenary to consistently challenge the Mayor on policies that directly harm Londoners, rather than allowing the sessions to drift into low-impact, politically convenient discussions?
Sorry, before you answer that, I was going to remind you, everyone, after the last time you asked a question, we are focusing on plenaries rather than MQTs. So just given the time, I think we'll move on. But I do appreciate that the last question you asked did actually link into MQTs, which obviously I appreciate.
This was about plenary. The question, I did say plenary.
Yeah, but you are focusing in terms of the questions specifically to the Mayor, whereas he's only there twice a year, so or at most really. So I'm gonna move on. So we've got Assembly Member Baker with media perspectives and impact.
Thanks. Yes. I've got some questions on media perspectives. Just to correct the record, just because we keep chatting about this, there was a bus driver and a bus driver's representative at the meeting before, but I do take the point that the interest of having different opinions on a panel is lively. Whether we choose to dare that in terms of whether it's the best way to collect evidence is a decision that we need to weigh up. But anyway,
were you, Ross? Why weren't you watching that session? He seems to have missed that one.
I wouldn't dare. That's not a question I'm going to ask. It was a very good session. It was very interesting, actually. Anyway, so my questions are on the media perspectives and impact, but obviously a lot of what you're saying is from that point of view. But just to give you an opportunity to either say anything that you haven't said or draw attention to specific examples. So in what instances, you may have answered this already in multiple ways, in what instances has plenary been most newsworthy in your experience? And what has contributed to that? Go for it now, thank you.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I often got more from the discussion of motions than the morning sessions where you would be questioning a mayoral deputy or whoever. I think some of those would be, the most interesting of those typically would be where the Assembly was obviously agreed on perhaps an issue of national importance with a particular London angle, like Heathrow expansion. Like I remember Assembly Member Roberts passed a motion, I think you all backed, or most of you backed, calling for the Mayor to include a sort of earmark money in his budget for a legal challenge against Heathrow expansion. That was a kind of really interesting example of the Assembly sort of agreeing in principle with something with the Mayor, but asking him to go further. That's those sorts of episodes were often the most interesting for me, but also where Assembly members would bring kind of more local issues in. So, for example, I remember the Assembly questioning the TfL Commissioner Andy Lord, and I think Assembly Member McCartney, in fact, raising the issue of speed cameras on the A10, and some of these sorts of local issues that might not previously have got much of an airing, and you're taking them right to the top of an organisation like TfL, would often be interesting. And actually, in that vein, a lot of sort of what you would classify as more local stories were often some of the most interesting. The Assembly looking at, or acting as a kind of convening body when other authorities can't agree on something like, could we get the former house of William Blake turned into a museum? That's the kind of thing where a developer and a local council maybe are not agreed, and the Assembly can say, well, actually, as the voice of London or as an alternative voice of London to the Mayor, we think that this should happen, and we're calling on all bodies concerned to do their bit, basically.
Thanks. And just to say, we are going to ask some questions specifically about how motions operate as well, but that perspective of what's been most newsworthy is really helpful. Tim?
I think that's a great point that Noah makes. Almost the motions themselves are mostly not newsworthy unless they're controversial or a bit mad, if I could use that. It sounds pretty pejorative, but the more unusual, I don't know if this was a motion that came to plenary, but I've got a recollection that Zach sought to pass a motion about the food in the canteen, and there was some exchange with Sadiq about whether it should be vegan only.
Yeah, I think that was a motion, yes.
That's the sort of thing that catches the eye of readers, but I'm not sure it's necessarily the message you want to send out.
We asked you the question.
Yes. The other thing, I don't know if this is the wrong time to raise this, or if this responds enough to what you're asking, but the other thing you have to do is really make it easier for the media, because the media is in a terrible state just now, especially local media. And if you can almost package up your good bits and also broadcast it yourself, don't rely on us to put it out for you. You know, use your own channels, your own social media, your own YouTube and so on, your Facebook page, and you know, put together an explanation of what's been said in the highlights. You know, your sort of, you know, your 2 or 3 minute digest, just like, you know, from the meeting this morning. There's some really interesting stuff being said about the impact of cycle lanes on bus lanes on, you know, what that means for bus passengers. But how does it get beyond a decent discussion? Because the other problem, of course, is that 3 hours is, I would say, far too long, and nobody's going to watch that again. But they could do with a lot of help to be shown these are the 3 nuggets that these are the 3 things you need to know that the Assembly found out today, and that you should be thinking about as Londoners about, you know, this is the reason that the 55 bus gets stuck at the Baker's Arms.
Yeah, thank you. And that was my next question was actually going to be how we can, well, encourage the media to come and see what we're doing or engage. And I suppose that, yeah, there's one example, make it more accessible effectively. Tim, so both that question, when have we been most newsworthy, and what more could we do to be more
we've covered a lot of this, haven't we, at the ground, but I'm fear of being ticked off for turning it on you. What would you, as members, miss? I mean, if you tell me that members would miss an opportunity if plenary was removed to find stuff they couldn't otherwise find, then that's kind of interesting. What would you say when you look at a plenary and turn around? Plenary or plenary? What do we say?
Both.
Can you come away from a plenary? Have you come away from a plenary ever saying that was a result? On scrutiny or accountability grounds, and I suppose I guess go back to those questions. I can't remember. I'm a little bit. I've been out of the game for a few months, but I can't remember though when I was there. I used to find the budget ones particularly useful, but I think, as I said a little bit earlier, you'd have them with half an ear behind. It's probably not exactly what you want to hear. I thought it was interesting but I have a certain amount of knowledge, like these guys, not as much, but I'm not sure what the plenaries would have done for the general public. I mean, let's be honest about it. How many people, do we have evidence? Do we know how many people tune into those? I would have found it useful just hearing a contribution from somebody. Someone said something that's worth like checking up on, or making sure I look out for that at the next, session. But I think we've got to be honest, really. It doesn't, I'm not sure that's the reason it should exist, to provide the odd little snippet. Yeah. Again, I do, and I think you guys could answer it yourselves, because I can't imagine you would miss it if it was gone.
I won't reply, because I'm sure there are 25 different views, and we're going to collect those separately as well. So yeah, but it's a good challenge. And just finally, is there anything you'd like to say about how social media has changed the landscape in terms of how you report on the Assembly, and whether we could use it better in relation to the plenary? I
wanted to ask about that in the plenary. Presumably an issue around that, around packaging up and doing all the work for people. You come across all kinds of balance issues. Someone's going to be how are you going to do it? How is an impartial civil service or secretariat here going to put out and make the choice about which clips are the ones that worked? And how are you going to present? That's something for parties to do, isn't it? Is it not? That's a responsibility for everyone to take from every.
There are complicated processes about what can and can't be done.
So I kind of feel you're a little bit hamstrung about being able to engage with these kind of modern forms of communication as an institution, whereas of course there's nothing to stop any of you as political individuals doing what you like.
Thanks. Is there anything, Noah or Ross, you've got to say about social media, or anything else that we've missed in terms of media?
Well, I find it particularly helpful now, and it's a great way now that essentially the Evening Standard no longer exists as it used to as a daily or evening paper, and 99.9% of my work is for the Standard website, which means that stories can be re-edited and updated all the time. So what you can essentially do is use your social media posts as a sort of bells and whistles to make when you scroll through the article, it makes it more visually attractive. So, for example, Mr. Chairman here is something of an expert on TikTok / Instagram, and about 6 months or so ago did a truly fantastic piece on the Lizzie Lyons birthday, which, without wishing to embarrass him, was really very good indeed. It made me actually, I think, I asked him whether he was actually in TV because it was that good. And more recently, you did an interesting one last week that I added to my story about the West London Orbital, when I think both you and Krupesh did pieces essentially suggesting that the Mayor's allocation of money in his budget meant that the West London Orbital was a done deal, which I thought was interesting. So I added that to it as well. So that it gave a different take on the story. But then, more interesting on that as well, then over the weekend I then spotted an alternative post by Tom Turrell, who said this is a load of old gaslighting, what a load of old nonsense. So then I went back to the story first thing on Monday and added Tom's comments in as well. So because of the way of the world now with online journalism, these social media posts can allow you to get your voice in hopefully an impartial story, and I think it's quite good. And I would be intrigued to see what kind of pickup you get from your pieces. It seems to me as a consumer of this, the Tory version of their little clips is very different to probably the more measured version you get from some Labour members, and how the Tory social media person does it, I think it's very funny to watch, but whether it misleads London is a separate issue. The way they've got these clips of Susan being clipped together, and then the editing is fantastic, but is it misleading? I don't know. That's the concern. So it's not as easy to take. You can laugh at that, but as a journalist, I'm not sure I want to embed that in a story because it feels more like propaganda than information. Where I think you might be missing a trick is whether you can put out something on the London Assembly's own accounts that clip, fairly edit what's been said by the Mayor or other guests at your plenary meetings, and possibly top it or tail it with the committee chair saying, this is what it means, this is my take on it. Just as you did the piece today, as many committee chairs do, saying we're having this meeting this afternoon. I'm not sure that's really the answer. I think it's more about what you get, Rob, because I don't think you're going to get many people tuning in. Sadly, I don't think we're quite up there with Homes Under the Hammer right now. But I think a good, fair summary of that as soon as possible afterwards, together with some sort of mini transcript, would be hugely useful to many journalists. The only issue, of course, is whether, I would imagine, the sign-off process for that is laborious, and whether you can get through the red tape to, just agree, here's the best 90 seconds of each meeting, and it's there for in perpetuity. Because one of the hardest things is going through your website, trying to find all the good stuff that you've done over the years. It's not, without clicking into the minutes, it's not easy to find a lot of the greatest hits.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, complex, but a really interesting perspective. So, yeah. No, did you have anything to add on? Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add, I think I would absolutely agree that and again, it would depend on each of the political groups being cooperative to make it happen. But if you were able to release, a list of sort of top moments from this plenary session, the Deputy Mayor revealed this to us, or this person admitted this, each group could have a certain number of bullet points that they'd get included within this. They could have a link to the relevant clip, and that would be the Assembly essentially signposting to the media the different parts of the Assembly, saying, we think, this bit is particularly notable.
Thanks. That's, yeah.
Thank you, and I do hope that we haven't lost any online viewers now that Ross has told them that Homes Under the Hammer is on at the same time. And have switched on over to another channel. Assembly Member Georgie. Thanks. Okay, thank you. And Assembly Member Russell, did you want to come in?
I just wanted to come in really briefly. Noah, you were talking about raising what we've done in our reports, and interestingly, the report that Ross raised, which was the one about road traffic collisions on Police and Crime Committee, which was published in March 2024. There are many questions and recommendations in there that have not been answered yet. I met with the Met last week and they are coming back on them, but we're kind of almost 2 years after the report was published. So actually, as a message to all of us to be paying attention to the recommendations that we make and whether or not we get answers, the idea of putting it partly into that sort of plenary process potentially would make us all pay more attention to it. So, sorry, that was just an observation after those 2 points they'd made.
Thank you. I'm going to pass over to Assembly Member Bakari.
Thank you, Chair. This may be counterproductive, but I'm not going to massage your egos. I'm actually going to hold you to account. And Ross, one of the things that you said was that the Assembly should perform at least as a valuable role as the voice of Londoners, or at least an alternative voice of Londoners. And that's what motions do. That's essentially what motions are doing. We are being the voice of London through the work that we do with charities, with groups that are actually really struggling to get their voice heard. And so I'm holding you to account to say, why aren't you paying attention to some of these motions that are actually incredibly important, really highlighting profiled voices that are not being heard, and that's what we do. Now, as a Liberal Democrat, I get approached probably more than maybe the large parties because those charities find, smaller parties, able to amplify those voices. So my question to you is, isn't it about time that you did pay attention to these hidden voices that aren't being heard?
Yes, you might be right. Journalism has changed, especially on the Standard, with the demise of the newspaper and the move online. So I know by the second which articles get clicks. We've got an app on our phone that can show us exactly what's doing well. So I could tell you right now how many people are looking at the Standard website, and crucially, how many stories are being read and how many are not. So I know precisely which stories are not of interest. And I use that data on a daily basis to try and inform what I do next. That's why I've written so many stories about the Freedom Pass, because it's one of the issues that's of huge concern to a lot of Londoners. If you were to look at the Standard data, you'll actually find the thing that interests them most is football. So Arsenal, Chelsea and Spurs consistently top the charts on what people read on the Standard website. This week, there's been huge interest in some very peculiar royal stories about, for example, Prince William riding an e-scooter in Windsor Great Park. Sometimes you wouldn't believe what people want to read. All I can say is that we have to make that judgment. It's not only does a journalist have to hit the deadline, which actually doesn't apply quite as much now, because in the old days we had 5 editions of the Standard a day and you had to hit the deadline, otherwise a space would appear in the paper when it went to the printers. It had to leave the building at 7:45 a.m, 9:30 a.m, 11:45 a.m, and so on. So it was unforgivable, unacceptable for you not to file your story on time. It doesn't matter as much now with online that you can get it out as quickly as you can. And normally, especially for a breaking story, the tendency tends to be that you get 3 paragraphs out, so you've got a headline and it starts to circulate and then you can add to it. But the constant battle is trying to work out, use your journalistic nous to work out what is going to interest Londoners. And all you've got to rely on is essentially your experience and now the data. Because previously, in the old days, when you had the paper, we would have what we'd call worldly but dull stories, which very often, page 2 was always the sort of politics page. Page 3 was a sort of glamour page where it'd be a sort of showbizy story, something that people like to look at, something visually attractive when you turned the page, the sport on the back. And the stories would be laid out according to what the editors thought would interest readers. And sadly, we know over time that certain things, if they're sort of niche stories, now they might be very important to a certain number of people, but it doesn't necessarily make them news. And that's the dilemma. You know, the classic example is, you know, plane takes off, plane lands. That's not news. Plane takes off, plane crashes. That is news. And we have to try and use our journalistic knowledge to essentially filter what we write, or choose what we write, because we can only, you know, essentially work 8 hours a day or whatever. I can only write 3 or 4 stories a day. I just can't do everything. I probably get 300 emails a day. I've always got a running list of potential stories. To me, it's almost like a bath with lots of little rubber ducks floating on the surface. The tap's still running all the time, and I've got a choice of which rubber duck to hook. And just because I choose one, hopefully you get the right one, but it also means you can't choose another.
Yeah, I think it's your question sort of hinges on the assumption that because something is written about, it's going to be well read, and that's not always the case. And so, yeah, I totally agree with what Ross has to say about the judgment that has to be exercised in terms of what is written about. Your question also raises philosophical questions about what journalism is for. Is it, you know, is there a value in writing something that no one reads? That's part of, you know, my role as when I was a local democracy reporter. That scheme was devised to sort of address that challenge, and make sure that reporters were covering local authorities and kind of doing the sort of eat your greens approach of giving readers, you know, this council has passed this motion on this topic. Because it was thought that, you know, that there's a value in that, and I think it's a good scheme. There is still a local democracy reporter covering the Assembly. And so, but the BBC, of course, don't have, not in the same way, the commercial pressures of other news organisations. So that's really what you're up against, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I know, Tim, that you've moved a little bit away from, but can you see a risk of journalism just moving to a point where you're just amplifying the big voices, the loud voices, and then continue to just hear those voices?
Yeah, but I mean, it's hard to. There's very little to add to what they've said, really, isn't it? Yes, I can see the problem. I think the practical on motions itself, though. I mean, you obviously see the value. We'll see that as a very important way of bringing the link between people out there and your work, and you amplify it by delivering these motions and petitions. And do they have to be done physically? Do you have to do it in the way you do, which takes time? Could they just be published? What's the advantage? Are you using those afternoon sessions in a good way, in the best possible way? Could you be using that for scrutiny more? Could you be extending the sessions? Sorry to go back onto my old and keep it just focused on plenaries, but do we, how valuable, I heard your point and they've addressed them both about the subject matter not quite hitting the mark, or you don't feel that, you know, enough attention is paid to it, but just in terms of the practical ways that the Assembly addresses them is interesting to me. But
the interesting thing is that when you look at, I mean, we get a monthly report about the media interactions and things that get pickup. So grooming gangs got a lot of pickup, but also the motion that I did on Islamophobia got a lot of pickup as well. But that wasn't because of the fact that I did a motion on Islamophobia. It was because of the racism that ignited. And I'm really worried about where things are going, that, you know, a motion about Islamophobia is getting picked up on because it gets a racist reaction. And is that what the media then picks up on?
Well, moving into a whole area, you should have a plenary on the current media environment in the capital. I mean, there's a good, you know, there's one of your wild cards. We're moving into an area of really complex and interesting and ever-changing area. You know, we could have an emergency motion on the further demise of London Standard, you know, over the last couple of days. I mean, you know, but joking apart, that's probably for kind of another session, isn't it, or another thrust of, because you're absolutely right about so many issues. They've already raised them.
I'll just add, if you can just kind of give me a one way of you suggesting us to improve our motions, other than some of the things that you've already said, what would that be? And can you tell me your favourite motion? And I really won't mind you mentioning the unanimous motion that we passed in the Assembly to do with the disability champion. Hint, hint. What's your favourite motion and why? You can't think of any.
No, I'm going to agree with the one that Ross comes up with in a moment. I'm just going to say over the last 10 months, no, I haven't seen it, but, and you know, I suppose it's even more applicable to the motion process or watching or the petitions than it was to the sort of plenary. I think I did have the plenary sessions often on, and one often made reference. Call me bad for ignoring, but we didn't get round to. I never had one iota of interest. There was no demand at all to see that sort of direct grassroots, for the reasons these guys have already said. So, yeah, sadly, I know I couldn't give you an example.
Yeah, that's telling.
And so I wonder whether, and I'm not saying that I'm, would be the judge here, but then if that's the case, are they serving the purpose that you intended or hoped?
Yeah.
Could they be done in a different way? Just slapped on the website and drawn attention to. Do you want to spend time on it? I don't know.
Thank you. I don't think I don't think you're obliged to
I did name a
necessarily.
couple, I think, in my earlier answers. So.
Hey, he did actually.
I've got. We've limited on time, and I've got 3 Assembly members who would like to still come in on this topic. So, first of all, Assembly Member Best.
I'm okay.
Okay, brilliant. Assembly Member Georgiou.
For what it's worth, I'm not sympathetic to motions whatsoever. I think 90% of them are a waste of time, as well as the speeches that follow them. But no, just yours, Ellie. So I am curious, though, because one of the interesting things about motions in the media environment, and I found it interesting as an Assembly member, and I include myself in this, you say things as if the camera isn't there. And I think that is what I find. You truly get to understand where AMs, what their thinking is, what they, if you look at the subtext in some of it, what they think about the mayor's policies. Of course, you know what Susan Hall's going to say, and you know what Assembly Member Duval's going to say, in that respect. But I do wonder, with regard to motions, not about the motions themselves, but the media doesn't tend to pick up what Assembly members are saying, particularly when sometimes it is quite radical. I mean, I know you use the Zach thing in MQT as an example, but if you listen to some of the other things, what colleagues say is actually quite interesting. Is that because fundamentally nobody knows who their Assembly member is or what we do or what we are? Could that be it? I know essentially papers and formerly the BBC are looking for clickbait, right? That's part of your business model. But anything in addition to that?
I think it's less about who you are than what you're saying and what the subject is. I think Noah gave a good example. He was very good at finding a newsworthy motion, and it's more about the topic that gets the clicks than it is whether it comes from yourself or Emma or somebody on the other side of the table. I think the fundamental problem with them, though, is that there's no power to enact them. So it's essentially sort of virtue signalling, and we know you don't like that very much, and that's the problem.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think even once you've explained to readers what the London Assembly is, you then get to the point of saying, well, they can't do anything. They might think this thing, but they're not going to have any influence in direct terms in making it happen. Probably for that reason, the plenary sessions that you held ahead of budgets could be part of why there are more interest, is because, well, it's a chance for you to politically challenge the mayor about why he is putting money into particular things, or why you challenged him on why he's raising council tax, and what was the sort of thinking or principle behind that. And that's interesting, because it's a rare moment at which the mayor is he has sort of political opposition and is sort of made to defend his political thinking or decision making. And of course, in theory, the Assembly, that's the one sort of hard power that the Assembly has, is to overrule the mayor's budget. Not that it's ever happened, but in a sense, there is something at stake in those meetings, even if only in theory.
I was just going to add to that, actually, about the budget example. I think there's could you get 2 plenaries, 2 bites, and then you get your MQT about the budget as well. I mean, you feel by the end of it that you've kind of not boxed a mayor, whoever the mayor is, in, but if you've watched all that process I think that is serving, that's accountability, it's scrutiny, it's quite effective. I think probably that's why I'm thinking that could just happen a little bit more with policing and transport, albeit, of course, you've got boards that exist there looking inwards with the mayor, that you could work on those as well, and housing and regeneration.
Assembly Member McCartney.
Thank you. This is one of the few things that me and Alex agree on, I think, because I'm quite sceptical about motions as well for a number of reasons, one of which I think that when we take a motion from a civil society group, they often think they've achieved something and they've achieved change when we pass a motion, but actually, as you said, we don't have the power to enact it. So I sometimes think we're raising hopes when we don't have that power. But also, I think the number of motions, and when they're passed, you probably get a press release every 5 minutes. And although I think the year to date we're running at, on average, 4 every meeting, a couple of years ago it was nearly 8 every meeting. So I think it's the number of them. It is an issue, and it really worries me that you say that, I think it was Ross that said that, well, they might get your attention if they're slightly mad. Which I think is, so I've got great scepticism of them. But is there any other way you can think that we could get the members of the public to come in and see us in a different format? Have you seen it working anywhere else before?
Well, I think you should focus on petitions, not on motions. You know, a couple of weeks ago I was watching a Westminster City Council meeting online, which sort of goes above and beyond, I think you would agree. But the reason was that about 300 residents in St John's Wood had all turned up at Westminster City Hall to complain about a cycle lane being installed in Hamilton Terrace, and they were all incandescent with rage, to use the hackneyed phrase. But it was democracy in action, and it was absolutely brilliant. And you had a highly articulate chap presenting the petition and, given 90 seconds or 2 minutes to state his case. The gallery packed out, cheering loudly when he finished, and then the cabinet member had to respond to it and explain why they were doing what they were doing and what they were going to do in response to the petition. And I think if you did the same thing here at your plenary sessions, and you go from your W14 bus people to your man who wants toilets at every bus stop, to your A10 boy racers, and then I don't know whether you can get the deputy mayors here for that part of the meeting to have to answer that bit of their patch. I think that would be great. So you've got somebody coming from Barking and saying, why is my house going on fire because of your useless cladding, and Tom Copley's got to explain himself. That would be democracy in action, and that would be my suggestion, how you could refocus the meeting and keep its breadth. But I say yes, say petitions, not motions.
I think I should clarify that Tom doesn't personally clad buildings himself. Thank you.
Okay, and Assembly Member Best would actually like to ask a question on this. So.
Thanks. Just, I think coming back to what Hina was raising about motions and the coverage, it would be really hard, I think, to cover motions when you look at the order paper and there's 14 motions, which is really hard to pick out what is the golden apple there, right? Is there an argument to limiting those to make sure there's only just 2 per session that could obviously be balloted for throughout the year on a political balance, or, members have an allocation perhaps, but making sure there's only a few on there, because that way, obviously, when you could even do more what you said, Ross, of making sure that those deputy mayors or mayor have to answer to that, because we're not asking them to reply to 14 things at once, and maybe it makes Assembly members think more carefully about what is the pertinent issue of the day. Noah?
Well, I think, personally, I actually found it helpful seeing a raft of motions that have been agreed, because, I thought, well, it's better to have a sort of wide choice of possible things to write about. It's really a question more for yourselves, I think. How long do you want to spend arguing back and forth about all of them? But, it was, and the thing also with motions is that they didn't, because I would often approach the mayor or whoever was the motion was directed at. It didn't have to be written on the day that it was agreed. You could sort of the following day or 2 days later say the mayor has, the mayor's office has responded to a call from the London Assembly to do X. The number of them wasn't an issue for me and probably isn't a problem for journalists. That's what I'd say.
I was going to say to that, the story would be in the content of the motion as well, not necessarily what you guys decided about it or what you said about it or what vote you had on it. That's something that wouldn't really matter. It wouldn't matter to you, would it?
No.
You'd be writing about them 3 or 4 days later. It was the story that was contained within them. So I'm sure you could completely truncate that process, if you decide to continue with it.
Okay, well, look, thank you hugely to our guests in the first panel and our first Q&A, and a particularly big thank you, obviously, to Ross for your comments about my social media posts. They are available on TikTok, Instagram, and other good social media sites.
So what are you going to get on your social media out of this, then? What are you going to put together? Yeah? What do you reckon? Yeah? Nice, lovely. Yeah. Our best bit. Can you imagine that's going to just break the internet?
Well, we are going to take a short break at this point and come back with another panel to continue the conversation. But thank you so much. welcome back to the GLA Oversight Committee, and we'll be continuing our investigation in terms of looking at how we do our plenary sessions, and of course one of those questions that we'll be asking ourselves is what we might want to call it in the future. We have 3 new guests who are joining us this afternoon, so just quickly introduce them and thank you very much for attending. Really great to have you all here. So we've got Professor Patrick Diamond, who is Professor in Public Policy at Queen Mary University of London. Professor Diana Strubu, who is Professor of Public Policy and Governance at London Metropolitan University, and lastly, but not last, but Professor Tony Travers, CBE, and if we can all just mention, obviously, congratulations to Tony for his new CBE. So not new, obviously, as a guest here at the Assembly. Always great to have you here, a Professor, obviously, at LSE. So welcome all, and thank you very much for joining us for our investigation. An opening question to you all would be in terms of what core purpose you feel the plenary sessions that we have, so these 10 sessions a year, could serve a body like the London Assembly, and what you would expect from an extremely effective session to achieve. So, looking at this with a blank page, we've got 10 sessions a year to use as we will to make sure that we are as effective as possible. What could those sessions look like?
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting us. I can speak for my 2 colleagues here this afternoon. So it's a great question, because the question of the purpose of legislative chambers anywhere, Parliament, local government, here at City Hall, Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland and so on, is an interesting one, because at some level many of them are to varying degrees legislative, and obviously the London Assembly isn't a legislative body, or not quite. It's got elements of it when it comes to the possibility of voting down the budget, which was discussed earlier, though that hasn't actually ever happened. So, in a sense, the Assembly lacks that bite that might come with being a legislative body. But I think one of the things that a body such as the Assembly, in the way that select committees in Parliament, both houses, scrutiny committees in local government, and legislative bodies more generally have, and it's an understated one, is that they are educative. That is, the way policy is discussed on the floor of a chamber such as this one, but it's true of the House of Commons and the House of Lords and others besides, is that because politicians want people to be able to understand what their policies are and why their policies are good, they're necessarily places of simplifying complex ideas. So experts can talk about nuclear power or clean rivers or choose your subject in elaborate, and professionals do, in enormous professional and often jargon-filled detail. But I think politicians, for all their faults, have to simplify, have to make things clear so that constituents, the public, can understand those complex policy ideas as they're debated and challenged. And one of the great things about particularly controversial political ideas is that they have people on both sides who will argue very cogently on both sides, and the public can feel that their view is being expressed and explored. But crucially, those who are uncertain can then come to a balanced decision on the basis of what people have heard. So I think the use of a chamber and the plenary type session here must in part be to explore political ideas and to simplify them so that they are more accessible than they are in the hands of experts and professionals. That would be my opening thought.
Thank you very much. Diana?
Yeah.
Diana, if you just want to push the button to...
Started well.
That's great, thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the invite to share some of my research with you all. Now, I'm an expert in the Welsh Parliament and how it evolved. There's so striking similarities in the way that the Welsh Parliament, as initially it was called the National Assembly for Wales, was established with how the London Assembly was established. Because, neither of them had very clear legislative powers at the very beginning. And I think, of course, now there's a lot of changes, and the Welsh Parliament has undergone a series of transformations and evolved as a fully fledged parliament. But I think those similarities at the very beginning can help us draw some lessons from like how they thought about the role of the plenary, for instance, or the role of committees, and what it means to be an effective body. And for me, I think one of the important things in relation to the purpose of plenary is that this is linked with the purpose of the institution as a whole, of the London Assembly. What is the London Assembly for? And is there a shared understanding, a shared purpose, a shared mission and vision of its members that is clearly articulated beyond the statute? Yeah? Is that clearly articulated? And is there a forum in which such a purpose can be articulated, can be shared, can be agreed upon? So that's my first thing. And actually linked with what Tony said in terms of the education role, I think the plenary also has and can play a symbolic role of how politics is conducted. I think in this age of polarization and negativity, I think plenary meetings and plenary debates can act as an example of how we can debate controversial matters in a reasoned and evidence-based way. So that I'll leave it here for now.
Thank you very much, Patrick.
Yes, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's always good as academics to get an excuse to leave the office and enter the real world and talk about kind of what's really happening out there in London at the front line of politics and governing the city. So it's it is genuinely great to be here and to be part of this discussion about the future role of the plenary and how that fits into the wider role of the Assembly. I mean, I'll just add to my two colleagues' points by making a couple of very quick observations. So for me, I think that the two qualities that need to underpin an effective Assembly plenary are scrutiny and visibility. I think in terms of scrutiny, I mean, obviously Assembly members will be very familiar with the issues, but given that the Government of London is running a variety of complex services which taxpayers are paying large amounts of money for, I would have thought that one of the key roles of the Assembly and the plenary is to make sure that there is genuine scrutiny and accountability around the delivery of those services, and that has to be at the forefront of what the Assembly and the plenary are doing. I think related to that is the importance of giving visibility to the work, again, of the government that is happening in London. So the services that are being delivered, the governance that is taking place, the decisions that are happening, there should be visibility around the decision-making processes that underpin those. And we had a discussion last year about the development of the institutions in London over the last 25 years. My view, which I gave you then, was that this is a story of relative success. I think the way that London is governed, the devolution process that began in the early 2000s, has been genuinely effective. But I would say one area where perhaps there is room for improvement is around the visibility of the Assembly. And so I would want to see the plenary contributing to that visibility. I just make one final related point, which is about the relationship between the Assembly and the Mayor, but obviously very interested to hear what members think on this question. I think that when the institutions were created at the end of the 1990s by the then new Labour government, and I think, as I said when I was last here, I was a special advisor in those governments, so I've declared that interest already to you, but I'll declare it again. My view is that although there was a very strong desire to create a directly elected mayor for London, there was not enough clear thinking at the time about the institutional ecosystem that needed to surround the role of mayor. And I think one issue that has left in its wake is that there is not sufficient there is arguably an imbalance in power between the Mayor and the Assembly and the other institutions. The Mayor has a very strong mandate, has very strong political visibility, and also has a considerable number of powers. And so, for my estimation, the Assembly, and through that the plenary, needs to have the instruments, the tools, the statutory powers to hold a mayor who is in many ways quite powerful properly to account. And I think if we can consider the role of the plenary within that context, then hopefully that will provide a framework within which to think about the role it should play in the future. But I'll leave it there.
Thank you all for those excellent answers so far. Just if we look at what potential unique opportunities the plenary can offer an organisation, a body like the London Assembly, is there anything that it could, would be a USP of plenaries, Diana?
I just wanted to continue a thought here. So we were talking about visibility and scrutiny and the education role. I think one other real opportunity here for the plenary, because this already exists, this mechanism. Currently, petitions can be presented or noted in the plenary. And I think there's something more to say and do about this in terms of elevating people's, citizens' voice into a forum like this, by not only noting and presenting a petition, but actually debating petitions or referring them to specialist committees or referring them to other bodies. So I think that there's an opportunity there to sort of rethink the connection between and the link between plenary and some of the other activities of the London Assembly with the sort of the citizens in terms of creating these avenues and more meaningful avenues by which citizens' voice is heard, acted upon, and then sort of follow up and sort of closing the loop, sort of say, be told what happened to their petition. So for me, that would be one area that seems like an area of opportunity to develop in plenary.
I mean, obviously, the plenary sessions already offer. I mean, I see that the interaction with specialist committees who are looking at transport or the environment always risks sort of overreach by the Assembly as a whole into the world of those committees, and that's a matter of feeling sort of judgment as you go along. But I think what the Assembly as a plenary can I think do is to or could do more to give voice to Londoners' concerns for not just, I mean, I take the point entirely about the scrutiny of the mayor, and it's most important role, the Assembly's most important role, but there are an array of other public sector players out there, many of which are incredibly powerful in affecting the lives of Londoners, and whose accountability is, to put it kindly, hard to understand. So, and I'm not having a go at them particularly, but the endlessly reorganised health service, for example, there's an array of public bodies which I think the public finds it incredibly hard to access and to feel that they have any kind of relationship that doesn't leave them feeling powerless, or they have to go through their MP, which is not great. I mean, MPs are fine, but MPs have a vast workload as well. So I think possibly the Assembly, in its plenary version of itself, might think about giving voice to and holding to account other organisations delivering public and actually, in some cases, private services in London. Thames Water comes to mind, where otherwise the public voice is incredibly hard for those who are managing at the top to feel them. They might feel them through a sort of consumerist route, but not in terms of public policy and holding those in power to account way, which I think the Assembly could do more effectively probably than any other organisation.
Thank you, Patrick.
Well, just to develop those points a little bit more. So I think there's one point around, more generally, how do Londoners relate to decision-making and how empowered do they feel politically? And just to add to that point a little bit more, I mean, you may know that as the Mile End Institute, which is our research institute at Queen Mary, does a quarterly poll of Londoners, so we do 4 polls a year. And several years ago, we devoted one of those polls to asking questions around how Londoners feel about how empowered they are, where they relate to decision-making, how much say they have over the decisions that affect them. And although the data suggests that Londoners feel a bit more empowered than people in other parts of the UK, there is undoubtedly, that polling suggests, a big power gap. People do not necessarily feel that it's very easy for them to be able to have much of a say or influence the decisions that affect their lives, whether that's in health or transport or education or whatever the service might be. So I think that the starting point for this discussion needs to be a recognition that for many citizens and voters living in London, they want to feel that they can have more of a say over the decisions that affect them. I think to develop the point that was just made about accountability, it is a big issue across the UK, but particularly in England, that we've developed ways of delivering public services which mean that over time, a bigger and bigger accountability gap seems to have emerged. I don't think it's the case, by the way, just in London. I think it's across the country. But there is this sense that many public services now have very complex structures. People don't know who to hold accountable. They don't know who's responsible. We've seen egregious cases in the NHS, as in other public services, of mistakes happening and people not feeling they know where to go or who to hold accountable. And so, if I can link that to the question of plenary, I think if the Assembly and the plenary sessions can play a role in trying to address that accountability deficit through the work you already do in terms of scrutiny, but trying to enhance that in ways that make people feel that what the Assembly is trying to do through the process is hold bodies accountable, get answers, pursue justice on behalf of those who feel that they've been mistreated, then I think that will contribute substantively to good policy making, but will also deal with what I've already mentioned in terms of this pervasive power gap that we do see across citizens throughout the whole of Britain, but I think in different ways, particularly in London.
Some recurring themes there, and also feeding on the previous investigation, of course, we did around devolution and holding those other bodies that impact on Londoners' lives on a regular basis that aren't necessarily part of either the GLA family or even directly with government. Are there any particular characteristics that we need to be making sure that we factor into our plenary sessions that you've seen that we need to ensure that would be making sure that we're as effective as possible? Tony? Yeah.
Well, I too need to declare interest. So I've worked as an advisor to select committees in Parliament over a number of years. And again, and I know this point's been made before, the Assembly has a fair amount in common with select committees in terms of the way they work across party lines. And I think that having watched select committees work, the way they are most effective is that if they're capable of individual members taking a point and then being given the freedom to follow it through, as a lawyer might in a court, with the individual they're taking evidence from. And I think that capacity to have a question, then a follow-up question, and an understanding about where the questions might go in order to pursue the powerful, those who are holding power and spending public money, is most important. So I think that in a sense, the preparations, and I know the Assembly has officers who work with them on this, but I mean, having the lines of questioning and the possible lines of questioning to pin, not aggressively, but to pin those who are often trying not to say everything they want to say and get them to say the things you want to get evidence about, I think would be, what I think organisations that are not themselves legislative quite, but have enormous capacity to probe and to ask questions in a logical and consistent way and to put those in power, into a position where they can't avoid answering.
And I guess one of the challenges that we have within plenary, which we don't necessarily have in the committee, we don't have in the committees, is the time limit for each individual to be able to do that. So if somebody is seeking to be evasive, they know that they are, the leverage is that actually if they eke it out, they don't, they'll be eking down that person's time. So how do we balance the need to try and make sure that every party gets their opportunity to ask their sets of questions with the opportunity, what you've just talked about there?
Well, I mean, again, the way select committees tend to do this is at a private meeting before the meeting, they'll divvy up the questions to make sure everybody gets a question they want to answer or they want to ask, and give the individual member the freedom to pursue that on the basis of advice as far as they wish to, but allowing the MP, the individual member of Parliament, their own freedom to do it in their own way. And in a sense, the Assembly does work like that already. So I think but sort of divvying it up so it's seen to be fair but also covering the ground is most important, and making sure everything gets covered, but that all parties and all individuals feel that they're getting a say, if not at every meeting, then over time.
Let me give Diane a chance to. Well, I'm just going to add very quickly that I think it came up in the previous session, but I think there is an issue around, would you want plenary sessions to be more focused on particular topics, which seems to me to be a very good question. In order to provide the time for that depth of questioning, do you need to have the space to drill down into a topic in much greater detail, which I think obviously select committees have the capacity to do in the way that the Assembly up until now hasn't really been able to do. The other issue I just want to put on the table quickly is around, is there a tension between adversarialism, which creates immediate political impact, and good scrutiny? And I wouldn't say the two are irreconcilable, but I think there's a question that I just want to really raise, which we can discuss again, but is really around if you have. I think there are real benefits to having adversarial encounters through plenary in the Assembly, because obviously it generates media interest, it generates political interest. It does also contribute to what I was talking about earlier in terms of a feeling that citizens could think the people who are taking the decisions are being held to account because there are fiery interchanges, maybe there's shouting, people aren't actually throwing things at each other, but there's a sense of there's a sense of okay, exactly. There's a sense of there's disagreement and there's debate, which is good. So I don't want to suggest that that's not important, but I think there is a question around, if you have too much of that, does it undermine more deliberative scrutiny in terms of really getting to the bottom of what's going on? Why was a decision taken in that way? Why has that service provider failed? So as I say, I'm not sure if it's a trade-off or a tension, but there's for me a question around what's the right balance to strike between those. I think going back to Tony's point, in some ways good select committees do strike a good balance, because there's conflict in some select committee hearings, but there's also deeper scrutiny and deliberation. So how do you capture that best? I think that's for me a useful question to pose in the context of the work that you're doing.
I'll bring in Diana, but I guess just to, on that particular point, obviously we're specifically looking at plenary where all 25 members can obviously attend that, whereas obviously a select committee would nowhere near in terms of that level of number of representatives. And obviously we've got the committee work on top of the plenary session. So, but Diana. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I think just following on your point, Patrick, also one of the strengths, for instance, of select committees and other committees, I suppose, or similar scrutiny bodies is whether they reach consensus or not. So you can have adversarial discussions, politics happening in the committee, but ultimately, do you manage to change each other's opinion and actually sign up to a consensual or unanimous report, for instance? Or so I think that's quite important as well. In terms of what makes for effective activity within a body like this, in my research with Welsh Parliament, and I don't know if I need to declare an interest because I've them on measuring how effective the committee system is. So what I'm saying kind of comes from that research, but the findings from that particular research point to the importance of this clarity of purpose. Whether it is in a committee setting or in a plenary setting, a session like this or any plenary meeting, is there an agreed sense of of what is this? What do we want to get out of this plenary meeting? Do we know what success looks like? And I think that's really important. The other sort of elements of effective working, I suppose, is around chairing, of course, allowing for these pre-meetings, after meetings, debriefings, to sort of test how we've done and so on and so forth. Structures and resources, particularly in organizations as small as this, and there's similarities here with the Welsh Assembly and the Welsh Parliament, being such a small legislative body which accrued a significant number of powers over 25 years and still remained at sort of 60 members. Now obviously from this year they're going to operate in an enlarged Parliament, but how important sort of the research, the legal advice, the translation, the sort of external communications and translation in the context of Wales, how important those services are to be integrated and actually support members. And I suppose the other 2 points I'll make is about creativity. Like because these are very formal designs, you know, like how do you create a space that is fit for purpose for whatever you want to achieve? Because if you want to hear or debate something around young people, maybe this format doesn't work. Maybe one needs to think creatively about taking the plenary out of the City Hall, or engaging these voices or witnesses or stakeholders in different ways. So I'll leave it there, but just emphasizing the point of importance of strategic communication, how what happens here is then make its way outside. What's the storytelling? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Diana. Assemblymember Baker.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for views so far. So very specifically, and I'm sure this will touch upon answers you've given already, but to Tony and Diana, what lessons could the London Assembly learn specifically from other scrutiny bodies who conduct sort of plenary sessions or equivalent sessions? Is there anything specific that we can learn?
So, for instance, in terms of the format of plenary sessions and all that, first of all, the London Assembly meets much more infrequently than any other similar body that I've encountered. So I think you have the limitation of having a limited number of meetings, and then the pressure on time in what you do in that meeting is enormous. Now, there's various ways, you know, in which this can be addressed. But I suppose in terms of lessons, for instance, the Scottish Parliament in plenary differentiates between more substantive motions, resolutions, so things that are quite important, things that require an answer, things that require a follow-up, and some of the more kind of congratulatory and, you know, like, we praise whatever the First Minister for doing this and that. So I think there's this kind of differentiation between sort of motions. So there's like a two-tier maybe system. In the Welsh Parliament, they have short debates where members actually can vent quite a lot. So that's something that
we definitely have that already, but no.
Yeah, but as I mentioned, in the Welsh Parliament as well, in the Welsh Parliament, the Petitions Committee, for instance, can present a petition that has reached a sufficient number of signatures. It can make it be debated in plenary, which is different from just presenting. And if it reaches sufficient support, then it can have a second debate, which is, again, I think symbolically, these kind of things matter. But those are the things I'm sure my colleagues have other examples.
That's fine. Thank you.
I mean, certainly, again, going back to the example of select committees, I mean, and I think this is true of all bodies of that kind and this kind, which is that some of what they had to do by way of scrutiny was, my word, worthy. It's the kind of thing that has to be done every year, looking at the department's annual report kind of thing, which just has to be done and allows an opportunity to scrutinise the department, all the way through to things that were all too newsworthy. And where unusual witnesses can be invited to come and give evidence, and that gives a lot of coverage when that happens. You can see that in Parliament. So a lot of what Parliament does is entirely and rightly towards the worthy end of the evidence gathering and reporting part of a spectrum. But every now and again, I'll give you an actual example for a committee I worked on a long time ago, where it's a long time ago now, where the Times, Rupert Murdoch was about to buy the Times newspaper, and the then select committee chair suggested to his committee, and all its members thought this was a good idea, that because Times at that point, maybe not actually whether it is anymore, Times Higher and the Times Educational Supplement belonged to the same group, that Mr. Murdoch should be invited to give evidence to the select committee. Well, I can tell you that did get a lot of interest in coverage. Suddenly Rupert Murdoch turns up in Parliament to talk about the future of the TES. So I use those as examples of quite a wide range of possibility, and there is room for both of those, and also for things, and going back to something Patrick said earlier, politicians being political, I think most of us think is a good idea, providing it can be done in a way that's articulating a debate rationally and, educative besides. And so having highly controversial subjects before as a plenary subject, I think is absolutely fine and would create interest, but it requires a lot of, dare I say it, heavy chairing. So, I think thinking about the worthy to exciting spectrum, and then also the important to less important issues, is a way of sort of thinking over time, covering a lot, covering territory that is both important and worthy, but also occasionally exciting and gets a lot of interest.
So is that? So my next question was going to be sort of how can plenary sessions complement committee work? I think that's probably an example, so that sometimes the committee's doing the worthy stuff and the plenary's doing the dramatic stuff, or are there other examples of where you can think of where plenary sessions can, enhance as well and not tread on the toes? So there's a lot of interactions you can have there. You got any thoughts about that?
I suppose there might be a line to be drawn. It would obviously be up to the Assembly to decide this, wouldn't it? If we take the scrutiny of the Metropolitan Police in what it does day to day, week to week, within every year, that is an entirely legitimate responsibility of the Assembly, which a committee generally might be thought to be the right way of doing it, because it can build up expertise about policing and how crime statistics are created and all of that. But one might think there's a role for the Assembly in a plenary session to look at a broader issue such as police accountability in London. That is the broader issue of the balance of power between the Home Secretary, the Mayor, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, which is widely misunderstood. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner is responsible for operational policing, and yet if you read the press, you'd think the Mayor of London could tell the Metropolitan Commissioner what to do on a daily basis. Now, there might be an argument for, by the way, and not my view, having a closer policy relationship between the Mayor and what the police do, but that's exactly the kind of thing I would have thought the plenary session could look at, whilst leaving the day-to-day, what are the police doing stuff to a committee.
Thanks, that's helpful. Patrick, have you got anything on that subject?
No, I think the question you just raised there about what's the balance to strike between the plenary discussion and the committee deliberations is obviously going to be a very important one, because committees can drill down into the detail of issues in a way that obviously the plenary wouldn't. But I think, going back to what I said earlier, the plenary is really about giving visibility and maybe also thinking about future challenges. So where is policing going? I imagine the committee will get very much into the detail of some of the operational issues and the priorities around policing, but we should also be thinking about what will the challenges be 10, 20, 30 years hence. And I think Assembly plenaries could play a role in doing that, in bringing discussion to the fore about what will the future priorities be in policing and so on. So I think there is scope to differentiate the role of the committee from the plenary.
Yeah. I'm just going to follow up on that, if that's just briefly, because I think that is technically what we try and do, that the plenaries are a transport plenary, but they often have a subject. I think often they have a sort of subject, or maybe not transport policing, but some of them do, a thematic subject. But what it actually ends up as being, that they end up being day-to-day questions about the policy area. So, I will be in a transport plenary sort of going, oh, I know the answers to quite a lot of these questions because I'm chair of the Transport Committee. So is there any, apart from us deciding what we're going to do, are there any mechanisms that we could make plenary sort of either more thematic or more engaged with what Londoners are doing, or have you got any thoughts on that? Because I'm just sort of trying to work out how we...
I'll add one quick thought to the question, which is a really good one. I think there's obviously an issue about, so what expertise are you bringing into the room to inform the discussion? And I would be the last to suggest that the answers ought to be found with experts. But I think the quality of inputs in terms of, people who can come and talk in an expert way, but also an informed way, and a way that relates to the business of the Assembly, that is going to help to keep the discussion focused on, in the Assembly context, what's the broader strategic remit, rather than just getting into the minutiae of day-to-day decision-making. I think the other question, which Diane alluded to earlier, is around what is the scope of citizen involvement? And on this, I'm a bit conflicted, if I'm honest, because everything I've seen suggests that getting citizens involved in assemblies of all kinds is extremely difficult. Obviously, people have looked at different mechanisms, petitions, ways of leading debates, and so on. But I think at the same time, I'm reluctant to say, well, let's just sort of give up. And we should be thinking as imaginatively as we can about how do we bring citizens more fully into these sorts of sessions. Now, I think in the previous discussion you had with our colleagues from the media, there was some discussion around location of Assembly plenaries, and that could clearly be part of the answer. But, I mean, it's also obviously around the topicality of what you're discussing, and also providing mechanisms by which the public can come into these discussions. And I would just say, I'm obviously aware that the Assembly is not a policy formulation body, but is there a way in which the Assembly can create the space within which citizens can play more of a role in contributing ideas around how policy should evolve? I mean, just to take one very quick example, let's talk about knife crime and young people. It would seem to me that there's a lot of scope for community involvement in discussing the ways in which we can practically make a difference in those kinds of areas. And the public should be involved in that kind of discussion. So how can the Assembly plenary create a forum and a focus through which to do that? And I mean, there's lots of discussions about how you would technically organise it. But I think, as I say, there is scope for more citizen involvement, and we should think hard about how we can best do that.
Thanks. That's right. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Assembly Member Russell, and just to make you aware that Patrick will need to leave about 4:30, so just as part of your questions.
Get going. So thinking more about challenges and opportunities. We, as an Assembly, we have a role which is to hold the Mayor to account. In the previous session, there was a bit of discussion about whether we could be holding other bodies to account that Londoners have an interest in. So things like Thames Water came up, an example of Zipcar suddenly withdrawing from London as kind of topics that might be not actually holding the Mayor to account, but although there is, in both cases, one can tangentially relate to the Mayor, but actually using the plenary sessions to kind of bring in different people to hold them to account on behalf of Londoners. And also, as you said, the idea of getting out of City Hall and taking ourselves around London, possibly using town halls, possibly using other kinds of venues. But do you think that the current design of London Assembly plenary sessions helps or hinders us in our role of either holding the Mayor to account or other bodies? Who wants to go? Tony.
I mean, I suppose the idea, I suppose the challenge is that for a very in a really important issue where all 25 members of the Assembly will be really interested, a meeting with 25 people holding one to account is a complex idea, isn't it? I mean, that is the trouble. That so the question of whether representative subsets of the, and I'm thinking aloud here, representative subsets of the Assembly to hold a plenary session might be more efficient, providing everybody got a bite, over time. Again, not everybody has to be there all the time. So I think And the Assembly as a whole, so slightly wider issue, is in the intriguing position. Diana's mentioned the fact that the Senedd, the Welsh Parliament, is about to extend its size to 100 and something. 96. Birmingham City Council, I think, has 100 members on it. The London Assembly, for 9 million people, has 25 members. Now, it's deliberately created to be small. There are all sorts of consequences that come with that. But so in the sense, 25 perhaps is too big for plenary sessions, but too small in some ways, arguably, for other functions, given the scale of the city and the incredible number of organisations that it would might be reasonably thought the Assembly could start to look at other bodies. So I think, again, we're back to the way of working to hold people to account, be it the mayor, be it Thames Water, be it national railway operators, whoever they are. I think the key issue again and again and again is how to make the public feel, going back to something Patrick said, that even if they personally feel powerless, there are people who represent them who have some chance, and I stress some chance, of getting through to people who, to many of us, seem to be distant and very hard to hold to account. And that powerlessness, I think, is a corrosive problem across society as another issue.
General, Patrick.
I was just going to add quickly that I think that there is it seems there's a compelling case for developing topic areas around plenary deliberations that are focused on the things that Londoners really care about. And you mentioned the example of Thames Water. I think, generally speaking, the performance of all public utility providers would be a subject that many Londoners would have very strong views about, given all the problems we know ongoing in many areas of utility provision. I think the question is obviously around the capacity of Assembly members to be able to scrutinise a very wide range of topics, because obviously you are, no doubt, of course, all experts in the areas that are very directly related to the governance of London through the GLA and so on. But if you start going off into lots of other topics that have their own issues, ecosystems, institutions, history and so on, it does become more challenging. So there I would just flag the issue of capacity and making sure that Assembly members are supported through good research capability to be able to do that scrutiny job effectively, because the reason why I do support that broader remit is because I think there is something very powerful about the representatives of the people of London holding individuals like those who run utility companies to account. I think that the visibility of doing that is, in my view, one of the ways in which we do begin to address that very pervasive power deficit.
Yeah, I mean, whether we can get people to come before us, but if they refuse, then there's the empty chairing, and that exposes their lack of accountability.
Absolutely, and if they respond by saying, well, we're not going to go to the Assembly because the Assembly is not, as it were, one of our oversight regulatory mechanisms, I think the Assembly has a very powerful riposte to that, which is that you have a mandate on behalf of Londoners, and the poor performance of these organisations are creating many problems for your constituents. So I think they would soon become aware that it was not a plausible approach just to refuse to attend these sessions.
Yeah. Tony.
To say, given these points about utilities and the incredibly high profile that Thames Water, I realise not all of London gets water from Thames Water, but most of it does. And, they've had another dismal, huge water main burst in West London today. And that the future of water regulation is about to be considered by the government and in Parliament. Question, could the London Assembly suggest to Parliament that the Assembly is given a formal role in the new regulatory arrangements for water? And if that worked, why not other utilities?
Totally agree. So can I just mention one other quick topic, which is smartphones in schools, where again I think this is an issue where government is going to be regulating or is consulting but may legislate and regulate in the future. But there are specific London issues around the use of that kind of technology in schools. And so it would seem to me very appropriate for the Assembly through plenary sessions to be, for example, cross-examining individuals from tech and social media companies. Notwithstanding what I was talking about in terms of making sure that Assembly members feel that they have access to all the background information, knowledge briefing and so on, that they would need to do that role effectively.
Interesting idea. Diana.
Yeah, just very, very briefly, I have to agree with both of my colleagues. I think there's a real question here, though, about this, about the formal and informal powers that the London Assembly has. Are these powers appropriate, especially formal powers, and what are the mechanisms to actually be able to say, well, we have a role in scrutinising Thames Water, we have a role in... So these are real questions. And, you know, again, drawing on the Welsh experience, there have been, I can't remember how many reviews of the constitutional settlement in Wales. A lot, and there's been lots of adjustments, and there've been a lot of sort of gradual and incremental change because of the need, because there was a need that was identified, and these sequences of reviews have actually recommended that that particular institution gets or doesn't get more powers. But in terms of this thematic approach to plenary, particularly in areas such as young people, for instance, there's a great opportunity there to connect more with the Youth London Assembly, for instance. From Welsh experience, there have been cases where members of the Welsh Youth Parliament, for instance, have spoken in front of the chamber, brought in things from their reporting, from their inquiries or from their work to the attention of Senate members, and those particular reports and findings have been debated and have been acknowledged, at least by in the plenary. So I think there's an opportunity there to maybe
That's something that we do. I mean, in police and crime, we had the Violence Reduction Unit, which is a group of young people working with the Mayor's Violence Reduction Unit, and they came and gave evidence when we were looking at violence affecting young people. So, yeah, and it was incredibly powerful evidence that they gave us, and really useful to hear their voices. So, Diana, just moving on to another question, which is about cultural norms in scrutiny bodies, and whether there are particular sort of cultural norms in the way that you work that make the biggest difference to the quality of plenary sessions.
I mean, on this question, there's always, you know, I come from the perspective of sort of committees in a sense, but I think this is applicable to plenary here in the way this institution organises plenary. I think in terms of the cultural norm is that, and this is very important, that's why chairing is important, is establishing that sense of collective endeavour. And this kind of goes back to the idea, is there a sense of shared purpose, mission, vision? Is there an agreed, whether this is kind of like at a very high level, or whether this is at the particular topic at a particular meeting, for a particular session. Yeah. So I think this is why these more maybe informal pre-meetings and you know, are quite important to establish that sense of direction.
It's also our plenary sessions. It's divided up by time. We've each got kind of somewhere between about 4.5 minutes-ish each to ask our questions. And so you end up with this very sort of, it's all in bits. And the journalists who were on the panel before you were saying it was incredibly frustrating because, you know, maybe Assembly Member Best was asking something really good, ran out of time, and, you know, someone else could have come in off the back of that and continued pursuing that point. But because we all go in with our plan of what it is that we want to ask questions on, actually we're not working collectively together in the scrutiny that we're doing, because that's not the way our current plenary meetings are set up. So, yeah, it's interesting that that's come up from you as well.
It's exactly the point, because this comes up again and again, and I think I've heard a lot from committee chairs in Wales about saying, well, do you know what, I think the best committee meetings or the best meetings that they've had was when people recognize that it's okay not to ask a question. You know, it's okay, just give space, you know, in the next inquiry or in the next session, you're going to ask more questions. And I think that's the sort of that role, that guiding role of the chair in ensuring that this sense of collective endeavour is, you know, developing within the plenary, within the institution and within the sort of committees.
Just thinking about how we consider and measure the impact of our plenaries, I mean, this is a question for both of you, have you got any thoughts on that?
I mean, measuring impact of reports, not just from the London Assembly of any kind, we all produce reports, is very difficult. It's genuinely difficult. And, we can go for fairly obvious measures, and
Can I pause you just a moment?
Yeah.
Because in our plenary sessions, we do not produce reports.
Right.
So the reports come out of the committee work, which absolutely I agree the committees should be really paying attention to the impact of our reports and following up on our recommendations, which we don't necessarily do. But so our plenary sessions, the way they're set up, we've got guests on a particular topic, and you've got 25 Assembly members each asking them their particular question on the bit of the overall topic that they are particularly interested in.
Yeah, so I mean, so what's true of reports is even more true of oral sessions, where you're taking evidence. And as you will be aware, the more, in some ways, the more politically controversial they are, the more likely they are to be picked up by the media, just a fact of life. Now, whether being picked up by the media is the same as impact is quite another matter. Impact, you would hope, would be that a particular scrutiny, be it oral, whether it produced a report or not, would change something. So does the line of questioning by the individual member or the member and the chair joining in afterwards, which I think is a way of extending any one line of questioning, then the question is, does anything change? And some things do change occasionally. After a public hearing, things will change. So I think, again, holding plenary hearings and then having to have some way of assessing whether the individuals who are being questioned in any way change their behaviour or do something different afterwards. That's the nearest I think you could get to real impact measurement. And, and sometimes things do work like that. And, of course, one of the things select committees do, again, is if they don't like what the witnesses said, they ask them back. And that can be, if you look at what's going on with South East Water at the moment, the way that select committee, which works incredibly well together across party, you wouldn't know who was in which party, the chair is independent, member of a political party, but independent and works. So I think that the capacity, now even select committees have the problem, they can't command people to give evidence. It all relies to some degree on people being willing to come and give evidence. And again, looking to the future and possible next, whenever there's next legislative change, the extent to which the London Assembly in its plenary sessions or its committee sessions has the power to require people to attend is, a matter worthy of public debate. Ditto the Welsh Assembly, Welsh Senedd and the Scottish Parliament, and indeed the UK Parliament.
Thank you. Diana, did you want to add anything on that point?
I mean, this is the eternal question, isn't it? It's like, how do we measure how impactful parliamentary activity is, for instance, and but it is, like a point that that Tony mentioned here is about, like the follow-up. I think it's very difficult to devise a methodology that will kind of very crudely assess, whether change has happened or not. But the mechanism of follow-up does exist. You know, like those people can be called back and asked what happened as a result. But I think other measurements would be, you know, if we're thinking at the other end, the more high-level end of the what's the purpose of this place? You know, like do we see a shift in visibility, for instance, for London Assembly and the work that it does? Do people know more about what happens in the plenary or not? Mm-hmm. So there's also this kind of more high-level goals, I suppose, that we can test whether there are shifts in public opinion or not. But it's an eternal question about how we measure these kind of things.
So, final question for me. If there was one thing, and you don't have to answer this, but if there was one thing you could change about the way we currently do our plenary sessions, what would it be and why? Yeah?
So this is going to be a very unpopular suggestion. Meet weekly? I don't know. I think this sense of purpose, this sense of collective endeavor happens when you meet again and again and again, and you're in the same place with the same people doing the same thing. But I'm not, as I said, I'm not an expert onto the inner workings of the London Assembly. Mm-hmm. From the little I know, it strikes me that it meets very infrequently.
We meet. There's committee meetings. Every week. Yeah. But yeah, Mayor's Questions is once a month, and plenary is once a month. So there's the two big set piece all assembly meetings.
Yeah. So maybe sort of timetabling. But that's I know it would be very unpopular, and I'm looking from the perspective of sort of parliamentary timetables rather than a body like this, which is a scrutiny body. So there's a difference there, which I acknowledge.
But useful and interesting perspective. Tony?
I mean, actually, I rather agree with Diana's point. I think I realise that there are only 25 members and there are committees and you all have lots of things to do, but a slightly more frequent timetable, perhaps with some annually known particular return visits, would ensure that you could cover more ground. And I think something I referred to, I think in terms of the challenge of every individual members having a particular line to follow, which they then follow, and then it stops after 4.5 minutes. I do think there is a role for the chair to pick up issues that the chair thinks need to be taken further and going on with them, even if it slightly gives the chair the chair has to do this judiciously, but I think that allowing the chair to pick up a theme and then push it further after the 4.5 minutes is a way of ensuring a particularly important issue can be driven further than just the one member and the 1 4.5 minute slot.
Thank you.
And speaking of which, time-wise, thank you. Handing over to Assemblymember McCartney.
Thank you. And to be fair, the time is proportionality, so it's per group, so it's not individual member, it's up to groups how they distribute that. So there is scope, I suppose, unless you're the last one in your group meeting. But I think you've answered most of my questions, but the one is, should we change the name of the plenary? Does anyone know what it is?
I think plenary is quite an off-putting word, yes. I mean, even, public accountability hearings, which is a bit clunky, but some short-term plenary, it's one word, and of course we call it plenary and plenary, some of us calling it one the other. Tomatoes, and all of that. But
tomatoes.
Plenary. But so I think the word itself is a bit off-putting. It's not a word all your constituents would generally use on, it's a term people use at conferences and meetings, but not in real life. And there are loads of words that they would understand, which you could use, you could use. So I think that is a slight distancing word, yeah.
Okay.
I would rather agree. I don't know what term would be better. Maybe just the London Assembly, the Assembly itself. I don't know how, but it is an off-putting term indeed. I think bigger institutions, parliaments, and so on, have the sort of, in a sense, the luxury of higher visibility, more resources to sort of publicize the work that they do, and different structures and powers. So I think, in a sense, if the aim here is to improve the visibility of what happens in plenary amongst London residents, this could be something that could be taken into account. But it's a difficult one to.
We could have a competition, perhaps, to rename it. That
Yeah.
could be
You
quite
can
dangerous,
crowdsource
couldn't it? Go on.
You could crowdsource it.
Aiming off the Boaty McBoatface risk. But yes, I mean, it's interesting. Westminster Hall debates, which is what they've called them, which is a way of doing something not dissimilar. That's quite catchy. Everybody knows what a debate is. They find out where Westminster Hall is. Lo and behold, Westminster Hall debates. So I think it would be easy to find a catchy term, to be honest.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And just to take, I was going to be doing this anyway, but obviously Tony suggested that the chair use his discretion to continue the line of questioning. So, Diana, you obviously have worked closely with the Welsh Senedd, and in terms of the one of the impacts that they have made is over the 25 years they've significantly increased their powers, and obviously now increasing their numbers. You've put that down very much in terms of how they regularly review their work and come up with new ideas as to how they want to work, and then obviously that then is fodder for the government of the day to consider and then give back those powers, as has happened over the last quarter of a century. How regularly have they been doing that, and how much resources do they put into that?
I think there have been a lot of different type of conventions, national conversations, and so on and so forth. I think one other thing that actually contributed to this was the actual flawed design, the nonsensical design at the time, which set up the Senedd, or the Assembly at the time, as a corporate body that didn't have, I mean, it was, and there were lots of very loud, I suppose, academic experts, political commentators that kind of shouted quite loudly about it. The first review was in 21, was an internal one, because they realized in 2001, 2002, that they were kind of a parliament, but not really a parliament. And in order to ensure clarity, because they were confused themselves, they decided to sort of operate in a virtual parliament mode. Then it was the Richard Commission 2008. Then it was, what else happened? Orwell's Convention 2009, 2010, Silk Commission 2012, 14, expert panel on assembly electoral arrangements, then the independent commission for
it's pretty much their business as usual in terms of doing this at a significant
these
scale.
are all like, it's a mixture of internal reviews, it's a mixture of UK government commissioned commissions and Welsh government commissioned work. So it's not all like they've just like to do these kind of things, but have come from internal pressures, a lot of institutional irritants, I suppose, and constitutional irritants that weren't working. And there was, I suppose, quite a substantive sort of amount of time invested in actually moving forward the constitutional settlement in Wales.
Thank you very much. Assemblymember Bukhari.
Thank you, Chair. You may have heard in the last panel, I did say to the journalists, and I said to them, I held them to account about how the London Assembly's plenary session could be the voice of London. And I'd like to know what you think we could do to engage those voices and help represent those voices better in the plenary session as a whole, including the Q&A session as well as the motions. Is that something that we could do better?
I mean, I suppose there's lots of ways. There's lots of examples of innovative, I suppose, or creative ways. When the mayor is questioned, for instance, was it Jeremy Corbyn that was doing that? That he chose questions that came from citizens and actually named them, and so there's that kind of avenue, or crowdsourcing this type of sort of questions, for instance, for questioning time for the mayor. There's in the Senedd in Wales, some chairs chose innovative ways to set the agenda, for instance, for committees' work by crowdsourcing ideas from the public to say which should be our priorities. So in a sense, like if you're looking for what are the things that Londoners care about, this can be found out either through various ways, and perhaps a portion of the plenary meetings could be, or these were the things that Londoners care about, so we're going to dedicate these 6 sessions to what they've asked. In other parliaments or sub-state parliaments in Belgium, there's even more sort of advanced deliberative innovations in terms of having, I suppose, permanent deliberative committees with members of that parliament working together with citizens in joint sessions. Examples from sort of the German-speaking parliament in Belgium. But I suppose, you can start with the small stuff, the links with the London Youth Assembly, the sort of questions, crowdsourcing questions from the public and making that visible, and crowdsourcing the agenda in a way. Those could be some ideas.
I mean, it's curious. I was talking with some of your journalist witnesses on the way out. It is a curiosity and just a coincidence that the 25, now 26 nearly, years of the London Assembly's existence and the Mayor's existence have coincided with the rapid and radical decline of the conventional media. And, from having 3 evening newspapers, the Standard, now online and about to change the way it's put together and so on. There are some excellent new websites, the London-centric and On London and the Londonist. These are good, and there are local newspapers, mostly by borough. But at the citywide level, it is a curiosity that, compared with analogous cities overseas, particularly in America, I mean, New York has a number of news channels, TV and radio news channels, on which assembly members would be appearing night after night. And why doesn't London sustain that? Well, it was tried. Lord Rothermere tried it with what was it called, Channel 1. Didn't last. And the truth is that it's almost certainly because it's 2 things. The presence of the national media in London leave very little space any longer for London-focused, London-only media. That's not to say there isn't quite a lot about London in the national press, but that's not quite the same thing. And then, of course, you've got the long-term decline in the local media, which is tragic for democratic accountability and for scrutiny of local government and, indeed, all government. So So I think in this modern world, you're left with things that are well beyond my known world, which, organisations like GB News and LBC are very good at clipping up. This did come up in the previous, and very good at clipping up exciting items to make sure that they get out there through sundry versions of the new media. But that is quite an exercise, and it's fine to do it if you're a private media company. More difficult if you're trying to get a nuanced picture of a debate involving politicians of different parties, trying to, scrutinise in a rational and logical way. And I think Parliament now does have clerks, as they're called, officials working to give select committees more coverage. But, it very much varies if you on the topic. Public Accounts Committee gets lots and lots of coverage because its reports tend to be full of shock, horror, many of their reports, not all, of how this government programme has failed, how this money's been wasted. It's good for headlines. So I think that the question of how very important issues which the Assembly can and does discuss through plenaries, through motions, but getting them out into the mainstream media or into the new media, is part of a series of modern arts, which some people are very good at, not me, I don't do that. And the Assembly will have to think hard, I think, about how to work in this new media environment.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The need for us to think out of the box, I think, is so necessary for us to be able to engage with the public, to raise raise the awareness of the Assembly. So what you're saying is not necessarily the topic; it's more how we talk about an issue.
Well, again, I'm not an expert in this. There are media experts who would undoubtedly give you great advice, but you can imagine things like, and I'm not suggesting this, but, too many podcasts perhaps these days.
Or we all start dancing on TikTok.
Well, but you could, two of you who have a very significantly disagreed view on a subject could have an argument about it and put it out on a subject of importance to London.
Yeah.
Now, that would balance the views. It would still be broadcast by City Hall. It would have to be managed. But, I'm perilously close to advocating controversy and clickbait as a way of getting coverage. But the truth is, without a degree of bite and a very visible topic where people have and I'm not saying the Assembly should do this, but if we take an issue like the assisted dying legislation, that's had massive coverage because there are very powerful views on both sides, which are heavily articulated in the media all the time with celebrities joining in. So I'm not, so whether something that goes slightly down that route might be possible to raise the topics that you and other members feel are not getting coverage, I think is, worth getting a media consultant in here to give evidence to you what they would suggest.
One of the other areas that we were talking about was also the motions that we have, and there's some differences even with colleagues next to me who think, less. I think they're great. There is an argument here about the need to make motions more effective. That's the main question we need to ask ourselves, and what we need to do to make. If we are going to have motions that are effective, how do we make sure we do that? Are there any scrutiny bodies that you can think of right now that are actually successfully using motions to get across the changes that they need to have within the institutions that they're representing and the places they're representing? Is there anyone right now that we can look to in terms of scrutiny bodies that's saying, yeah, well done, they're doing really well on their motions, they're doing the job?
Are you asking whether there's any institution analogous to the Assembly which has a process a bit like the motion process which gets more coverage and interest and debate about it?
What does get more coverage?
Well, I suppose the thing about motions is, I have the advantage of looking some of the recent ones up, and they're on, to put it mildly, a very wide range of subjects, okay? So they kind of range from roundabouts via post offices to the one you mentioned that you were discussing, your own one that became controversial and got coverage, and then to the abduction of Ukrainian children. It's a very wide range for, I think, any part of the media to think, how does this sort of, why should I look at it to know that there's something interesting there I need to follow up? You know, we all have our favourite media sites, and I think that the range of things, it's not to say any of them aren't important, I'm not saying not important, and having a way of raising them, it's a bit not unlike, you know, early day motions in the House of Commons and private members' bills at Westminster, where an individual MP can raise it, get other colleagues to support it. But, you know, quite a lot of them don't go very far unless they're very, very, very heavily supported and, you know, aggravate the government or the opposition of the day in some way. So, so I think that if the motion process is going to work, it would probably have to be rather more targeted and consistent, and then it would be possible perhaps to highlight individual motions, particularly because some of them are very political, some of them are unanimous. That's the other thing. So nothing wrong with either, but I think at the moment that they're too varied for any part of what's left of the conventional media. I think I must keep looking at that. If I may, that sounds a bit rude. I don't mean it to be rude.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your honesty and for your time this afternoon to both of you. Really appreciate it in terms of the expertise that you've got in this area. We've now reached the end of our second question and answer session. So thank you to both of our guests. And if I can ask the committee, please, to note the report as background for putting questions to the guests and the subsequent discussion, and also delegate authority to myself as chair in consultation with the deputy chair and party group leads to agree any output arising from the discussion. Can I ask the committee to note the next item on the agenda, the London Assembly Quarterly Budget Report, and also note the work programme for 25-26. The next meeting of the committee is scheduled to take place on the 10th of February in the Chamber at City Hall, and there are no urgent business, so I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.
This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority.